Good evening. I'd like to call to order this public hearing sponsored by the Urbana City Council, the purpose of which is to receive public input on an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate at 1301 East Washington Street. Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Is there any public input on this item, which is, again is the sale of real estate at 1301 East Washington Street in Urbana? Seeing no input, this meeting is adjourned. And we'll now turn this over to Dean Hazen, who will serve as chair of the Committee of the Whole.
Okay, looks like it's 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start the Committee of the Whole for City of Urbana. Today is Monday, July 24th, 2017. Would the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Next up would be the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which is July 10th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jared and seconded by Mary Alice Wu. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I had one correction on item 9, resolution 2017-07044R. I was chair of the motion, or I was chair of the meeting, and it has me down as seconding the motion. So I checked my notes, and that was Ammons that seconded.
Ah, okay.
Do we have any further discussion? Does anybody want to move to, what are we doing here? It's been moved.
We just vote on it.
Anybody want to vote on those? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor, say I'm not in favor. Okay, looks like it moves. Okay, are there any additions to the agenda? Or did we just do that? No additions to the agenda? Public input. We have Durrell Cruz here who wishes to speak at the time of the agenda that's going to be presented. So I guess we'll put that on hold. Is there any other public input that anybody wants to put in? Okay. And then we'll move on to presentations. I believe we have a presentation probably starting with the IDOT traffic study with Chief Morgan and their crime stat analyst.
Dean,
Yes, Mayor.
I wanted to make a couple comments before they started.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I became aware of some concerns from the public regarding the fact that a copy of the presentation, tonight's presentation on traffic stops, wasn't included in the council packet, so I wanted to make sure everyone understood why that was. As you'll soon see, the format of tonight's update is a PowerPoint presentation, and it focuses on information derived from the Urbana Police Department's new mapping software. And the content is somewhat different from previous updates. A number of the slides contain maps overlaid with geographic and demographic information. And in order for this data to be interpreted accurately and for us to understand what we're looking at, it was important for Melissa to be able to provide context and explanation for each of the slides. Due to Melissa's workload, which recently has included extensive data collection and analysis for the CU Fresh Start program, among other things, and a planned vacation last week, she wasn't able to produce a detailed written report to accompany the slides. So as anyone who uses PowerPoint knows, releasing slides without supporting information can leave things wide open for misinterpretation and misunderstanding of what you're seeing on the slide. So since our goal is to share accurate information, ensure that everybody is seeing And hearing the same thing, I recommended that we not include the PowerPoint slides in the council packet. The complete presentation made tonight, the slides will be available on the city's website as part of the meeting video.
Thank you.
And Melissa's also available to meet with council members individually to further discuss this data if there are questions following this meeting. And as you know, the city council, the previous city council approved the purchase of this mapping software to better understand how police activity, traffic stops, calls for service, and other factors intersect. And this came out of the traffic stop, our study of the traffic stop data. So I think you'll find the information to be useful tonight, and it will certainly inform our decisions about policies and practices going forward. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood the reasoning behind the decision not to include this particular presentation in the packet. Thanks.
And if I may say one more thing before they start, this tonight's agenda does have the potential to get lengthy. I would appreciate everybody's help with keeping this, running efficiently and raising your hands before you talk, so that I can keep track of everybody, since this is my first time chairing the committee, and just help us to keep things moving along. If you would, I would appreciate it. Go ahead and start. Thank you.
So it's been about 3 months since the last presentation, and there are a couple of new council members, so I did want to kind of go and do a historical overview of how we got to be where we are. So in January of 2014, City Council established a traffic stop task force, and then in October of 2015, there was a final report with recommendations issued, and then when this is on the website, there's a link that you'll be able to view the full report if you so choose. There were a number of recommendations that came out of the task force, and we've made progress and completed many of them. So there's now, when an officer makes a traffic stop, there's a motivation for stop checkbox that they indicate their motivation for stop, and also the reason for stop. There's been ongoing police implicit bias training that was both in 2016 and 2017, and then there's been traffic stop training that was conducted in 2015 for 8 hours, and these topics are also covered in daily training bulletins and scenario-based training. I was hired in late August of last year. We pushed all of the traffic stop, yes, sorry. We pushed all of the traffic stop data to the open data portal that's on the city's website, so this is all publicly available in raw data format. City Council reviews traffic stop data biannually, and we do that quarterly now, so that's a little bit more frequently. We do analysis of arrests from traffic stops that's been presented at each of these that I've done, examining the disparity in outcomes from traffic stops that's been presented previously and will be presented here as well. One of the recommendations was to do an educational video. There was one that was done previously, and that's linked here, but there will be another one that will be begin recording in the first week of September. The police participation in Walk is one, and the next one for that is in September, and then we ongoingly encourage participation in ride-alongs and the Citizen Police Academy. And then outside of the recommendations, we have made other progress. As to address some of the financial disparities, there's been a reduced Urbana City Code fines for possession of cannabis and paraphernalia, and then extended the length of time available to pay minimum fines for city code violations. There are random supervisory reviews of traffic stop videos that are conducted on a regular basis. There's been the addition of a beyond scope checkbox to traffic tickets. So if an officer questions the driver beyond the scope of the traffic stop, then I'm able to track that. There's the Human Relations Office has hired a community outreach specialist who's a retired UPD officer, and he serves as a liaison between the community and the city of Urbana. And then, as Mayor mentioned, we've been doing some extensive collaboration with CU Fresh Start, both on the data analysis side, and also there'll be some surveys that will be conducted of citizens in Urbana. All right, so tonight we're going to do kind of an overview of statistical methods, which I know is going to be everybody's favorite, but there's some advanced, there's some techniques that I'm going to use that I'm going to talk about, and then I'm happy to meet individually afterward. We can set up meetings individually afterwards to go over some of these if there are lingering questions. But if you have questions as they arise, please let me know. All right, so we're going to talk about some measures. So we're going to look at changes over time and things. So most of the things that I'm looking at tonight are going to be for the first 2 quarters of 2017. So from January 1st to June 30th of 2017, and we're going to compare that to the first 2 quarters of 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. So the previous 5 years of the first 2 quarters together. That controls for seasonality. And so we're going to be able to see not just the change from last year to this year, but overall, setting our baseline to be more than just the previous year. So in order to do that, we look at the range, so the high and the low. We'll be looking at the variance, which is how far each year's total is from the average. And then you square that and take the average, but that's unimportant. And then we're going to be looking at the standard deviation, which is how far from the average each of those is. And so in simpler terms, the standard deviation is the measure of dispersion that a set of data has away from the mean. So the smaller the standard deviation, the more clustered the data is, and the larger the standard deviation, the more spread out it is. So the z-score is going to be the statistic that we're going to talk about the most, and that's how we're going to use the standard deviation, or how spread out the data is, as a ruler. So we can account for the past fluctuations and quickly look at things that are outside of a range of what we could expect, or what we should be expecting, based on the variation that occurs within Urbana. So we're using our own data to then try and quickly flag things that could require our attention. So for it to be notable, I've selected 1 standard deviation above or below the mean. In academia, it's usually 2, but this is instructive to consider things that they're a little bit higher or lower than we've done in the past. This test technique is considered a best practice in crime analysis. All right. Number of traffic stops that we've conducted year to date 2017 is 1,601. When we're looking at the first 2 quarters for the last 5 years, we conducted 871. So this year we've conducted fewer traffic stops, and based on the z-score, that number is significantly lower than what we would expect. So it's a little bit more than 1 standard deviation below what we had conducted on an average from the last 5 years. And something that we do, the Selective Traffic Enforcement Program. Those are step stops that are decided by the Traffic Commission, and then some of the UPD command staff and officers sign up to work the step detail, and that is what they're doing during their time. So on average, about 30% of our stops are through the Selective Traffic Enforcement Program. This year, a higher percentage of our stops were from the step stops, and not outside of the STEP program. So that is a little bit more than 1 standard deviation away from what we've seen in the past, so that is a significant difference. When an officer initiates a traffic stop on the traffic ticket, they indicate the reason for the stop, and that can be a moving violation, an equipment violation, or a license and registration violation. For the last 5 years, we've seen an average of about 71% moving violation, 20% equipment violation, and then about 9% for license and registration violation. Those things have fluctuated a bit looking at just 2017, but none of them are outside of the range that we would be expecting. One of the things that was added in 2016 was the motivation for stops. So that can either be a traffic issue, community caretaking, or targeted patrol. The data collection for that began in 2016, so I don't have a z-score reported there. We're just looking at the change from January to June 2016, January to June 2017. So you can see there's an increase of about 8 percentage points looking at the motivation for stop being a traffic issue. Community caretaking has gone down a bit, and targeted patrol has gone down as well. This quarter, there were 4 targeted patrol stops. So now we're going to talk about disparity ratios. That is going to be the percentage of drivers stopped by race divided by the percentage of drivers on the street, driving on the street by race. Disparity ratio of 1 would indicate that drivers of that race are stopped proportionally to the driving population. A disparity ratio of higher than 1 point something, would indicate that more drivers of that race are stopped than would be expected based on the estimated driving population. So if we have a disparity ratio of 1.5, that would indicate that drivers are 50% more likely to be stopped of that race than we'd expect based on the driving population. if we have a disparity ratio of less than 1. So 0.75 would indicate that drivers would be 25% less likely to be stopped than we'd expect based on the driving population. The driving population is what we'll talk about here in a minute. So starting in 2004, we reported all of this to IDOT. It's required by the state. All police departments across the state of Illinois report it. They break it into minority drivers, non-minority drivers. So I've got the yellow line there of 1, and that would be that drivers of minority race would be equally as likely as we would expect based on their population. The IDOT traffic study utilizes populations from the census to create an adjusted figure for the driving population. So they look at individuals age 14 or older as a proxy measure. There are a couple of problems with that. Half of the drivers that we stop in Urbana don't live in Urbana, and the census numbers from the population are probably not representative of the drivers on Urbana city streets. Secondly, this aggregates all of the minority races into one category, which masks the individual disparity ratios. So even though this number approaches 1, when we break it out into different races, we can look at it a little bit closer. So in Urbana now, we're going to, instead of looking at the census figures, we're going to look at, for our driving population, the races of drivers involved in accidents. And that's going to be a better representation of the people that are driving on Urbana city streets than the people that live here, just solely because we have a huge population that comes in from outside. We've got Carle Hospital, we've got U of I and events and students, and so the best measure that we've decided for drivers on Urbana city streets is the percentage of drivers by race involved in accidents. So when we use it that way, we can break it down and look at it by race. So this goes back to 2004 to give a bit of a historical perspective, but you can see the one that's consistently above the 1.0 line is the African American line, and that reached a high of over 2 in 2010 and has dropped, but it still maintains about a 1, it's still above the 1.5 mark. And so anything that would be 1 would be more likely, and then below the line, we've got Hispanic, Asian, and Caucasian drivers, based on the driving population, are less likely to be stopped than what we would expect. So looking at it now for the quarter 1 and quarter 2 of the past 5 years to quarter 1 and quarter 2 of this year, our disparity ratios are not significantly different, except for Caucasian here has gone up a bit. Our African American ratio is 1.62, Hispanic is 0.96, Asian is 0.94, and Caucasian is 0.86. So based on this, it means that African American drivers are 62% more likely than we would expect based on the driving population to be stopped on Urbana city streets. To put this in scope, we've stopped 906 Caucasian drivers in 2017, 479 African American drivers, 153 Asian drivers, and 60 Hispanic drivers up through June 30th of 2017. So there are a couple of different places to look at racial disparity. There's the decision to stop, and then there's what happens after the stop. So when we're looking at the decision to stop, there's the kind of that question mark of what's our baseline, what's our benchmark. When we're looking at the outcome of the stop, we know what that is because we know who we've stopped. So this kind of looks at the outcome from the traffic stop in the most serious outcome. So if you get a citation and a warning, we're looking at just the citation. So it's the most serious outcome that results from that. So overall, about 52 to 56% result in a citation, a little bit 40-ish result in a warning, and then about 4 or 5% result in something more serious than a traffic violation. And so that would be a DUI or a warrant for an arrest. So we can do the disparity ratio based on that. So using our benchmark or our baseline, our denominator is going to be the percentage of drivers that we've stopped by that race. So we can see that we stopped 505 Caucasians and issued warnings for Caucasian drivers. We stopped 477 African American drivers and issued 265 citations. So when we do it that way, we can come up with disparity ratios of outcomes. These all cluster pretty closely to 1. We can see that from 2012 to 2016, there has been a significant increase from 0.92 to 0.99 for African American drivers receiving a citation. The score is a 6.5, and that just means that this is 6 times the standard deviation because the standard deviation is about 0.1, or 0.01, I apologize. But these all cluster pretty closely to 1. And then with the outcomes that are more serious than traffic violations, this year we've arrested 35 individuals. 25 were African American, 10 were Caucasian. Of that total 35, only 2 were discretionary arrests. The rest of them were felonies that necessitated somebody being custodially arrested and taken to jail. Consent searches and dog sniff searches, the numbers are very low, and we've talked about this previously, but we're not going to track that on a quarterly basis. We'll do that yearly. And then looking at disparity ratios of traffic stops now. When we break it out by step versus non-step, we are able to look at our data a little bit more closely. So African American stops from 2015 to 2017. Now I've expanded the baseline so that we can have bigger numbers because we're disaggregating these, and it makes it small sample size is challenging to overcome. So we're looking now at 2.5 years worth of data. So overall, we have an African American disparity ratio of 1.57. When we split that out and we look at steps, patrol stops, and non-step patrol stops, we go from a 1.34 for the non-step to a 1.69, or 1.34 for step to 1.69 of non-step. So overall, our step disparity ratios are much closer to 1 with exclusion of Asian drivers. So we're going to look at this spatially now, which we are able to do because we have mapping software. So this was a lot of work to get it to this point. It required some extensive data transformation and a lot of time with IT and a lot of time with the software folks. But this is 8,700 traffic stops mapped. There are not 8,500 discrete points on here though, because many of the stops overlap. So I did some spatial analysis with it. So this is the density, looking at the kernel density. So calculating the density of population around each cell, and Bill Brown probably knows more about this than any. Essentially just looking at how densely, how close together the traffic stops are occurring. If we've got more than one traffic stop occurring at one location, then it shades it in darker. So the darker colors indicate a higher density of traffic stops occurring in that location. This is all traffic stops that we've done for 2.5 years. So we can see they're clustering here on kind of the main thoroughfares. We've got 5 points, go up and down over here, and so that's kind of what we would expect. We can break this out by race. So we can look at the density of traffic stops, all traffic stops, African American drivers and Caucasian drivers. You can see there are some differences that are evident over here, differences evident over here, and we're going to look at that a little bit closer. So the non-step traffic stops, these are the ones that we have the most racial disparity at. These are where officers are patrolling and not in the predetermined step locations. Breaking it down by race, it's more broadly dispersed with African American drivers than it is with Caucasian drivers. You can see that they cluster in the same areas. It's the same pattern, but the borders are a little bit wider with African American drivers, and then we see more Caucasian drivers here, but it's particularly evident up here in the north side. So then the next step that I talked about doing at the last meeting was looking at citizen-initiated calls for service. So this is the density of where we are responding to 911 calls. These are not officer-initiated. These are not traffic stops. These are when a citizen has requested that we respond to them at their location. And then when we overlay it with the 2010 census tracts of the percent African American that live within the census tracts, you can see that most of the higher concentration of calls for service overlap some with the higher concentration of African Americans residing in those areas. So then we can look at it with all non-step stops, and this follows the same pattern. It's on the same thoroughfares, but the borders are a little bit more into the residential areas. We can break that down as well, looking at the calls for service with the demographics with traffic stops. And this is this is where we're seeing it. So we see more African American stops in residential areas here where we also have more calls for service. All right, so as our summary, thus far this year, we've done fewer traffic stops than we've done in the past. We've done a higher percentage of traffic stops. There's been no meaningful change in the motivation or the reason for stop or in the disparity ratio. There has been fluctuation in the disparity ratio for outcomes, but all of those remain pretty closely clustered to 1. Looking at the spatial distribution, there's a high concentration of traffic stops on thoroughfares. Non-step stops are more broadly distributed across neighborhoods, but still we see the concentration on the thoroughfares. Non-step African American stops are also more broadly distributed. There are higher concentration. There are more traffic stops that occur in areas with more calls for service. And the concentration for calls for service in census tracts with higher percentages of the population that is African American. So what's next? I would like to schedule follow-up meetings if anyone is interested to talk more about this. Soliciting recommendations from City Council and staff for further changes, and then meeting with African American communities and reporting back to City Council with recommendations and feedback. Questions?
Questions of anyone? Eric?
This is just procedural. Should public input come before council questions, or should it come after? What is the right procedure?
Could you help me out with that, Charlie?
I have questions for them.
Typically, we get a staff presentation, then public input, and then there's an opportunity to bring staff back for additional questions as well.
Yeah. So I think there were a couple of
Thank you.
members of the public who wanted to comment at this time.
Okay, thank you for helping me with that, Eric. Mr. Darrell Cruz wishes to speak.
Yeah, I
Okay.
misunderstood what you said, too. Do you want them to ask their questions, and then you want public input, and then we can come back if we need to after the public input? Is that what you said? Okay, well, I misunderstood what was just said, I
want to
guess.
ask questions now, and then let the public do, and then ask the questions again.
That's,
I don't know, if it's just a preference thing.
Okay. Darrell Cruz, would you come up and speak, please?
Do you want us to leave then so we can speak? Or just move to the side, or? Yeah, I don't know.
So just for the public record, the chair gets to decide that without voting on it or anything?
The chair controls the meeting, but if somebody wants to make a motion to alter the order of things, and if that motion passes by a majority, then the order can be changed.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion, or do we want to move on?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Cruz, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. I appreciated the presentation this evening. I think most of the information presented is consistent with what we've seen the last 13 years in terms of data that's been collected by the city and by the state of Illinois. We know that traffic stop racial disparities for African American drivers have remained relatively unchanged the past 5 years, with only a variance of 1.76% between those 5 years, in spite of every action taken by the UPD and City Council. In 2016, African American drivers composed, of course, it was kind of alluded to, 28.4% of all stops. They were 53% more likely to be stopped than statistically expected. Little has changed in 13 years. And if you go to the IDOT website, they have printed the IDOT traffic stop report for 2016. What was given you tonight is actually more updated. It was the last 6 months, and it's more current. They never spoke to any of the information in the report. But interestingly, for the first time in the IDOT traffic stop report, they also have included a traffic pedestrian stop report as part of that for the first time. That was passed legislatively in 2015, and I passed that out to you and would like to speak briefly to that. because I don't think that's ever been talked about or presented to the City Council, and I think it's an important part of the picture that we need to be aware of. As I said before, this was passed in 2015. The data that you received that I attached on the back page is only partial data of all pedestrian stops, since there's no requirement to collect data for stops that do not include the criteria I listed: frisks, searches, summons, and arrests. Only those pedestrian stops are required to be reported, so there were many more pedestrian stops than that. A community's demographics, such as Urbana's, are based on the 2010 census data, and citizen population of 16 years age and older, because that aligns with the driving population. But it's also important to note that pedestrians are more likely to be local residents than people out of town, and that was reported in the state report as a reference. I'm just quoting some information that I read from that. Number 3, traffic stops and pedestrian stops are often reflective and related to how a department responds to crime and disorder problems. And so I think that's why it was included in the state and why the legislation passed the law, to be able to look at pedestrian stops and traffic stops collectively together, because there's some similarities in terms of how neighborhoods are policed and the outcome as a result of that. Number 4, the state traffic and pedestrian stop studies covers a host of research studies regarding police style strategies, focusing on 2 key questions, and I think Eric would be especially interested. There's like 18 pages of research since 1970 to 2010 and 12 that's included there, which is very interesting to read, and basically focus on 2 key questions: what type of crime control strategies are particularly promising, and what are some of the potential problems and pitfalls when adopting such strategies. One of the findings, and I quoted this because I think it's relevant to the discussion the City Council is having currently, and that was on page 15 of the report, and this is quoted, taken from it. They concluded in this report that the dramatic increase in stop activity in recent years is concentrated primarily in minority neighborhoods, and that minority residents are likely to be disproportionately subject to law enforcement contact based on the neighborhoods in which they live, rather than the crime problems in those areas. Moreover, this disproportionate contact is based on more than the level of neighborhood crime and disorder. Demographic makeup predicts stop activity above and beyond what local crime conditions suggest is necessary and justifiable. I'd love to speak to you more about that, but can't do that tonight. But I'd like you to look at the chart that I put together, and it was kind of surprising. I just took Urbana and Champaign and the U of I report, and you can see the African American population of Urbana by census population was 5,344, and stops, pedestrian stops, there were 423 African American pedestrian stops that fit the criteria that were listed above.
You have 1 minute, Mr.
Interestingly, as you go down and look at Champaign and the U of I, pedestrian stops by their law enforcement were significantly lower.
Can we have you silence the cell phone, please? Thank you. Apologize,
I was
Mr.
wondering
Carson.
where that was. Okay. So in conclusion, just looking at this, in your African American, in Urbana, African American pedestrians make up almost 58% of all stops, while composing only 14.8% of the city's population. That's more than 3 times what one would statistically expect. They are also stopped in significantly greater numbers in greater proportion to their population than in neighboring communities. In Urbana, it's 1 of every 12.6, and in Champaign, 1.1 in every 29. I'd like to have 3 minutes just to finish.
I'll make a motion that we allow
A few minutes.
3 more minutes.
Okay. Does anybody second that
I'll
motion?
second.
Okay, so it raises some questions. In Urbana, is there a relationship in traffic stop and pedestrian stop racial disparities based on policing strategies and tactics chosen or used by the UPD? And are these disparities justified in making our neighborhoods safer and effectively reducing crime? Obviously, current policing strategies and tactics are directly related to traffic and pedestrian stops. racial disparities, but have not been critiqued using current data. The time has come not to just present data, but to use the data to understand and inform meaningful UPD decision-making. We need a commission, as recommended by the Traffic Stop Task Force, to conduct an analysis of the data to answer several questions, including, 1, is there any way these racial disparities can be justified? If so, what are they? If not, what changes to how we police our neighborhoods need to be made? I do believe the ultimate solution resides with UPD. If these disparities are unacceptable to them, which the new chief needs to reaffirm, then after a commission review of the data, the UPD will be in the best position to answer the following question. And I think they should answer it. What neighborhood policing strategies or policies does the UPD think they can modify to reduce traffic and pedestrian racial disparities while still effectively protecting the community and reducing crime? It will not be easy, but the UPD must work to accomplish both these ends. Isn't that why the City Council started down this path several years ago? I hope you form a commission to begin the analysis and continue this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Just to clean that up there, we needed to vote to give him extra time, so we're going to go ahead and go back and do that. Is that correct, sir? Okay. Bill Brown, motion to extend that speaking,
Dennis.
or Dennis did, for 3 minutes, and then Jared.
Or Aaron seconded.
Who did?
It doesn't matter.
Somebody second. Aaron, you
Yeah,
seconded?
that's
Okay, then we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of approving that extension?
I have discussion.
Okay. Say aye, please, if you're in favor.
No, I want to discuss this motion before I vote it.
Oh, to extend it?
No, because I don't remember us ever voting to extend anybody's time.
Okay, that was sent to me by council there. That was not my doings, so I'll let him answer.
You have a rule that sets a certain limit of time, and what should have happened in the past and what should happen now and in the future is if you want to suspend that rule, it would require a vote. Otherwise, you have a rule. No reason to have a rule if you're not going to follow it.
So we just haven't been following it up to now. Okay.
Dennis did.
Correct.
Okay. So if it's all right with everyone, I'll ask if you're in favor of extending that, say aye.
I would have voted aye.
Okay. If not, say aye, please. Okay, that motion passes. Then I guess we're going to move to any questions for Mr. Cruz.
Daryl,
Go ahead, Aaron.
what's the title? You said there was a book or something that was
No,
presented?
if you go to the IDOT website, they publish 2 reports. Now they do. It comes out at the end of June or the 1st of July, and one is called the Illinois Traffic Stop Report, and the other one is the Traffic and Pedestrian Stop Report, which I wasn't even aware was occurring. When I checked a week or so ago, I was surprised to see it, and I think it's useful information for the city to have, and I really didn't expect the UPD to report it.
There was another piece that you said, it was a quote about neighborhoods being policed based upon the demographics as opposed to issues of crime.
Yes.
Is there something that you could share just to further enlighten us
Well,
about?
if the report is about 22 pages long, about 16 pages is research studies. And the latest research is much more timely than some of the early research. And one of the latest research studies that was done was in 2010 and was reported. And one of the findings of that report is what I just included as a quote, that in fact the increase in traffic stops and pedestrian stops that are occurring in disparate numbers in minority communities is due to the demographic of the neighborhood rather than possibly the crime that people perceive exists, and so the over-policing can be unwarranted, over-warranted, and as a result, it creates these disparities that have also a negative effect in the community. I mean, if you look at potentially 1 in 12. And the interesting thing, I wonder how many pedestrian stops are not even reported. These are only required stops that result in a pat-down, an arrest, or a warrant search. It doesn't count those stops that are made just to question or talk to somebody because there's no outcome. And one of the recommendations Al Wise had at the end of the report was that data should start to be collected also, so you can see what the result or the context is of all pedestrian stops, because obviously there's a significant number and it's affecting our minority community significantly compared to other races. And they suggest basically there's a relationship in policing between traffic stop disparities and pedestrian stops, and I think this kind of reinforces that understanding, that context.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
I apologize, my attention lapsed. Please, can you provide again a pointer to the study you're citing?
Not at this point, I can't. But I can email you that. It's you can go on the IDOT and you turn to that page 15, whatever I quote, and you can read it yourself. It's there.
Okay, thank you.
It's available to the public.
Mary Alice?
So I'm just curious, I'm just looking at these numbers, and so these numbers are based on 2016 data, is that correct?
Exactly. It's from January 1st to December 30th, 2016. All IDOT traffic and pedestrian stops are data that are given to them by the police departments, usually by the end of March of that year. So this information was sent 2016 to the state in March, and the consultant, Al Wise Consulting, puts this together each year and puts out the report late June or early July. So this is 2016 data supplied by the Urbana Police Department to the state.
Thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. That's the first time I've looked at this pedestrian stops for Urbana. As far as the motivation for the stop, I think it's easy for us to understand with traffic data that if somebody violates a traffic rule, you get pulled over. I mean, these are stops that aren't necessarily jaywalking. They're just stops for other motivations.
If you read the report, Al does not use the word investigatory stops. He uses the term suspicion stops to describe pedestrian stops. In other words, it's up to the discretion of the patrol officer based upon some suspicion. And he suggests that potentially 30% of the pedestrian stops do not rise to the level of reasonable suspicion, but there's no way to prove that. But officers, of course, can use their discretion based upon seeing a person. They may want to know why they're walking in this neighborhood or why a group is congregated in a certain area. It is simply officer's discretion, and it is allowed based upon suspicion.
And then you also mentioned that the commission recommended, that the IDOT task force recommended we develop a commission to evaluate whether we're making progress
Recommendation
on
2,
racial
3.
disparities. I think the actual recommendation was either the city council or an appointed commission
Exactly.
evaluate everything on a semi-annual basis. So you don't feel comfortable with the city council evaluating our progress?
Well, I would feel comfortable with the city council if the city council understands what I interpret the task force intent to be, and that was to spend several meetings of several hours to go through the data with specific questions and purposes in mind to understand the data as it relates to traffic stops, and now I think pedestrian stops, and I raised the questions in the end, maybe they're justifiable, maybe they can be explained some way, and maybe they can't. Is there a better way of doing it? If the city council's willing to commit to doing that, I'm comfortable with that, but you've got a busy load. And I would suggest that it was even recommended, I think Peter Resnick even said it would be great maybe to have the former city council member, if he was willing, maybe somebody from that task force, maybe a representative from the police department, and another person or two from the community who's interested. You get 3, 4, 5 people together that are willing to look at this and come back to the city council in 2 or 3 months with a report. I think that would be helpful, and it would take the burden off of you to do it. But
Okay.
somebody
Thank
needs
you.
to do that, or the data, you collect the data and do, that would be the crime, all the time and stuff you've invested. If you aren't going to look at the data, and the public isn't going to have a role in looking at that and being part of the analysis, you've wasted the last 3.5 years. If you don't, you've been striving to get to this point. So don't waste the opportunity or the challenge. It shouldn't be left solely to UPD, is what the task force said. The city council or a commission should be part of that.
Any other questions for Mr. Cruz? I guess not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Next up, we have Mr. Martell Miller, who wishes to speak.
Martin Motion, City of Urbana. How you doing there, council? I've been talking about racial profiling in this community probably over 10 years, maybe 12 years by now. I'm looking at the study. Whereas the study is asking the people, the African-American men, what they think about. Are you talking to ask them, do they feel they're getting stopped a lot in Urbana? And I can tell you about pedestrian stops. I done had 4 pedestrian stops within 4 blocks of here. One was by the University of Illinois. All 3 of them been by Urbana police. My last time I was approached by Urbana police, I'm standing in front of my house on the telephone. She comes down the street, she slams on brakes, asks me, do I need anything? I'm on my telephone. I told her no. Then she asked me, do you stay in this neighborhood? I asked her why. I wasn't bothering anybody. It was 3 or 4 other people walking down the street. She didn't stop. So I know that was a racial profile. Stop. And when she kept talking, I said, where you stop, where I'm talking at, this is where I stay. And she kept going. And there's a female Urbana police officer. And this was probably about 4 months ago, 5 months ago. Then I had 2 other stops, one walking from common ground. Officer pulls up and stops and asks me where I'm going. Then ask me my name, ask where I'm going, then ask where I come from. I asked him, did he need my ID? And this is me just walking in my neighborhood where I stay. I don't stay on the north end of Urbana, northeast end, And what I want to say here, we can pull these numbers, all the numbers we want to pull. Are we going to really deal with the problem? We know it's racial profiling. You can sit here and I can get somebody to come and do numbers for me and prove totally opposite of you. But we know it exists. And our job as a city government is to fix the problem. I tell you one thing you did good, we got new leadership with the police department. Because the other chief didn't even want to have the conversation about racial profiling. I'm in the meeting, me and Aaron, in the meeting with him when Urbana City wanted to get tasers and wanted the African-American community to go along with it and see what they thought of it. But when we mentioned racial profiling, and Aaron mentioned it, the man got very hostile. I ain't been to another meeting with the chief since, because he wants to see about what the police consider a problem, but he don't want to look at the community problem. When I was growing up, when I first started driving, we knew after probably 7 o'clock when it got dark, you don't cross Wright Street if you're a young African-American driving because you get stopped for no reason at all. And today it probably still happens. And let's deal with the problem. We don't need no research to know that it's racial profile. We don't need no more research to say it's racist in America. We just need to deal with the problem. Deal with the problem. Thank you.
Did anybody have any questions of Mr. Miller?
I do have one question, actually. Did you happen to get any badge numbers, names, squad car, vehicle numbers, or anything of these officers who were asking?
It was
these
Mr.
questions?
Stefanis. I can give a name. I know a lot of police by their names, just like they know me by my name.
And this was the officer who stopped you when you were standing in front of where you live, asking
Right
you
where I live on the telephone.
if you had a problem. And any of the other officers who asked you where you were going, where you've been, do you have any? do you
No,
have
no,
any?
I don't have them names, but I mentioned them 2 other stops previously at this city council meeting, me walking as a pedestrian in a banner.
I think it speaks to the point that Durrell was raising about the pedestrian stops, because these were stops that were not recorded. And
Right.
that's 4 that you described that could have been added to this. And when we look at this data that was presented, the key indicators, the total stops being 423, and contraband was found 3 times. 423 stops, contraband is found 3 times. Even if you want to go with the pat downs or even the consent and suspicious, out of 160, you're still talking about 3 people who were found with contraband. So that was all the questions that I had for you.
But that comes to the drug war, and the drug war was on the poor and the blacks. And I'll leave it like that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Let me see if we have any further public input here. Bishop King James Underwood does not wish to speak, but would like us to know that he is continuously concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems, and also the same message from Eldris Melinda Carr, and the sewer problems and the equity and historic impact. One moment. Okay. Did you want to come back up to the front then?
Is that- question, do you want us to come back?
Apparently I do, so. Do we have any further questions from the council of the chief and for statistician here? Melissa Haynes. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. And you did a very good job explaining what kernel density is. Just to check what I heard, that was 1 year of data for the kernel density maps you
No,
did?
that was 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
So we went
okay.
back to 2015 because we're breaking it down. So we're pulling out all of the stops and then we're pulling out the 30-some% for the non-stop. So I had to expand the.
And did you try looking at any other time interval, like 1 year at a time or anything, to see if anything had changed over the 3 years?
I looked at 2017 to start with, but when I looked at my numbers, especially when I was trying to just pull the African American stops, the pattern was the same, but then I didn't feel comfortable with that sample size.
Okay. And then I noticed, I mean, we've noticed it before, there's a pretty major drop right after 2010. And I think we talked about that before the new census numbers came out and the actual percentage of African Americans went down or up? I forget. Up, I guess, in the new census. And that caused our disparity ratio to drop. Was that calculated into those graphs? I know you did some adjusting for that
one
at one
of
point.
them, this is the one that was reported to IDOT. This would be the one where the census would change it. This is ours, and this is with the accidents.
So that's adjusted.
And so there was a different way that we recorded accidents before, I think it's 2012. So all of the numbers, it's looking backwards. So we're using the numbers, I think, 2012 to 2015, looking backwards. So that's we didn't record the traffic accidents the same way before that, but it's
Okay. It
assuming
might
that
be
it's
nice
static.
just for those slides if you could indicate which the source, like whether it came from the traffic, the baseline came from the traffic ratio or from the
Yeah,
census.
this is the only one that comes from the census.
From the census, okay.
Everything forward is accidents.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I saw a couple things that looked like they went down. The non-step stops overall went down,
Correct.
and a higher percentage are related to traffic issues than the other issues than what used to be. One thing seemed to go up, that was the citation disparity ratio, and you said that was like a 6.
It was. And so this is something that's been really consistent in the past. So it was, our standard deviation here is 0.01. So this is 0.92. So 8% less likely to receive a citation than we would expect, plus or minus 1%.
So
when this
usually
goes up 7%, it's a lot closer to 1, but it's a very large change from what we've seen in the past.
So it's still less than 1, but over the past 6 years, it's been more or less than 1. It's been 0.92, 0.93, 0.91, stuff like that, and all of a sudden now it's 0.99.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions. Thanks.
Eric?
Just a few questions. Would it be feasible, or if feasible, do you think it would be significant to take into account differences in age distribution in different demographic groups? Because we know very well that young men especially are terrible drivers. Actually, old men get to be terrible drivers too. I looked up the statistics. As Darrell alluded to, I'm kind of a nerd about that, and I was dismayed to discover that I am at the age where the accident rates start to creep up again. But that aside, do you think that this might skew things significantly, especially because you're normalizing relative to accident rates?
I did that, and I didn't present it with the year end of 2016, and it pretty nicely not nicely, but we're ticketing drivers of different races at about the same rates that they're having accidents. But again, we get into the problem of of how the sample size is so small when we're breaking down, and we've stopped 153 Asian drivers this year, and when we're looking at the number of 16 to 20-year-olds, then that's even smaller. So I could perhaps look at it a little bit closer, and I could certainly update what I looked at for this year to monitor.
Okay, and then maybe a second question. This would really be for the chief. Is the density of patrol, when you're not responding to calls for service, does that pretty well mirror calls for service, or would it be significantly different from that?
No, I would say it fairly well would mirror the calls for service. I'm not saying exclusively, obviously, because there's a whole area of campus that we do patrol that, and when we're not busy, do try to get everywhere in the city as much as we can. But most of our time would be spent in the areas where we're getting calls for service.
And then I think a final question: would it be feasible to do the same kind of analysis for pedestrian stops? That is, what is the what was motivation? What is the outcome? Or are pedestrian stops? There are statistics that Darrell presented, which indicates that they are recorded in some way, but are they routinely and always recorded in a similar way to traffic stops?
So in January of 2016, the legislation changed, and we were required then to start tracking pedestrian stops. And when all of that occurred, because we live in Urbana and work in Urbana, we knew that you would want to have us track more than just what was required to be tracked. And so since January 1 of 2016, we have been tracking all pedestrian stops, whether they're reportable or not. I don't have the data or anything to speak to that right now, but I would be happy to do that at some point.
I guess since I'm only asking questions and not appropriate for me to make statements, I'll put this in the form of a question. Are you pretty confident that the City Council will stay on top of this going forward?
I feel very confident.
Mayor, go ahead.
Could you go to the map that shows the citizen-initiated calls with the traffic stop? Okay. It looks like the highest density for traffic stops is in the same areas that where calls for service occur. What's your feeling? If the calls for service were evenly distributed across the city, would we see a significant change in racial disparity in these traffic stops?
Are you asking me or
Yeah,
her?
I mean, yeah.
So one of the hardest things I think about all of this is the fact that half of our stops are from people that live outside of the city of Urbana. And so I don't know what the perfect way is to track this or figure out this, shy of building a fence around the city and not letting anybody in and not letting anybody out and then start tracking it. It's a flawed system in how we're looking at some of these things, so it's very hard for me to try to figure out if, that's something that would change or not. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that I feel confident speaking to that.
Aaron?
So just to speak directly to the point that you just made, the overlays that you did in the map are all based upon the accidents, is that correct?
This is the citizen-initiated calls for service. Accidents are included in this if someone has called us to the location of the accident. So this is when somebody picks up the phone and dials 911 and we respond.
Okay, so that gives me a perfect segue to make my statement, because I'm glad you read your statement, Mayor, about that it was your decision not to put the information in the packets for the public, because I find that to be unacceptable, that the City Council would not have the opportunity to digest the information that's going to be presented here tonight, and then at the same token, the chief now comes and says that she thinks the City Council is very capable of looking at this and will stay on top of this. Yeah, we'll stay on top of it to the degree that we get the information. Okay, so that's not acceptable. We do need an outside commission to look at this, to analyze it, to spend hours doing it without folks rolling their head and being upset and huffing and puffing because it's so tedious and so unnerving to some people. So I was very dismayed not to be able to look at the information, to try to digest and process the information so that I could ask pertinent questions to get a full understanding of it. And if the report wasn't ready, then the presentation didn't have to take place tonight. So we could have waited another week, sent the information to all of us to make sure that we had the information, that we could digest the information. It explained the maps and things like that, especially with it being so dense and so much information that we have to process. So I'm not happy at all about not having that information in my packet so that I could process that. The other thing is that the patrol question was one similar that I was going to ask. So these particular areas that have the higher calls for service, officers are assigned to those areas every time they go out on a beat or something like that? How does that work?
The city is broken down to 5 different beats.
Mm-hmm.
So north of University and east of, so it's not an exact line, but east of Broadway-ish is the beat 6-1. I mean, I can get you a beat map, of course. We didn't bring one. I'll put up on the slide, but I could have done that. Beat 6-2 is going to be the northeast part of town, north of Main Street. So it's a little different on that side of town. We try to. The last time it was looked at, we look at calls for service and reports that were taken in each of these areas to try to decide whether we needed to redesign the beats or realign them or have a different barriers between them. Then 6-3 is going to be mostly campus town, is west of Race Street and south of University. 6-4 is going to be south of Main Street, sort of to Florida. There's a weird demarcation on that 1-2 as well. I can get you the map. And then 6-5 is going to be south of Florida.
So my question is,
yes,
currently, when officers are sent out in particular beats, the areas where we have, according to this data, the highest calls for service, do we send more officers to those areas?
Depending on what our manning is, there is usually at least, we try to have one officer per beat. That doesn't always happen. So sometimes there's, one of the beats will go not covered, or sometimes we'll even have, depending on, we'll have someone on the north end and someone on the south end, and then we'll have some cover cars for that as well to try to cover better. So they are assigned to a certain beat, and that's where they're supposed to stay for the majority of their shift unless they come back to the station to write reports and things like that.
Right.
So that's where they're assigned. There is not normally, I would say not on a regular basis, is there 2 officers assigned per beat. If they need a backup officer or they're going to go out and do foot patrol and they want someone to go with them, they'll ask for their backing beat officer to come and do that with them.
So then, based upon what you have shared, then the calls for service should have no impact on the traffic stops or the more high density, the high density areas that we see on this map should not be affected by calls for service, because if there's only one officer in a particular beat, he or she can only stop so many people so many times. So the numbers should be more equivalent to the step patrol then, because if there's only one officer there, there's just only one officer there. I thought you were going to say that there are 2 or 3 officers patrolling a particular area. Since you have more officers, they see more rolling of a stop sign or loud music and stuff, and therefore there's more stops. But what you're saying is that there's sometimes nobody even in a particular beat. So I still don't, it doesn't make sense to me why more calls for service would equal more stops. That's just not adding up, okay? Is there something that you can help me understand about that?
Well, what I would say is that we patrol the areas where there are more calls for service because that's where we have higher crime. And so, yes, they are being more proactive and doing more stops in those areas. So I would disagree with your statement.
So what you're saying is that the one particular officer who may be in one of these high-density areas is just going to stop people more because there are more calls for service over there?
I'm just saying they're more likely to because they're trying to prevent crime.
Well, I think the data shows that they're more than likely to. They actually are doing that more, which would be unfair and over-policing of a particular neighborhood, which leads to the information of what Mr. Cruz was talking about, because there's no actual evidence that it's going to, there's no actual correlation between the more stops and the calls for service. But I think I'm making my point there, and I do want to say this as well. I certainly approached this historic problem from the standpoint that it was really heavily racially motivated. And I have grown to understand that there are also tactics, policing issues and concerns within the neighborhood that lead to some particular things. And there's a growing need for a more in-depth conversation around what implicit bias really means and how it impacts any particular department, the city of Urbana as a whole, or any of us. And I don't think we've had enough of discussion about that. I would love for maybe you and Mike Schlosser to come and do a presentation or something on implicit bias and how that affects our police department. So I just wanted to say that I realize that there's more to this than just someone saying, hey, here's a black person driving a vehicle, therefore I'm going to stop them. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, because I do believe that it does. But I wanted to say that I do think that there are some things about policing that lead to some stops, but that the intention is not heinous or ill-motivated all the time, right? So I just want to make sure I say that, because I get a bad rap for coming at you guys all the time, or ladies, in the way that I do.
That's okay. I'm a guy. So can I speak to something that you said previously? Is that allowed, or do I just sit here?
Go ahead, Chief Morgan.
So the only thing I wanted to say about the release of the information prior to is not, and obviously it was the mayor's decision, which she said, but up until literally an hour before we came in here, she was still making, some tweaks and changes, and so it was literally would have been impossible to have presented or to have had something typed up ahead of time. We're certainly not trying to hide anything, and if I am allowed to make a suggestion about doing a presentation one time and then having discussion later, I don't know that I'm allowed to say that, but I just wanted to say that it's not because of trying to hide anything or trying to limit, what your ability to digest it. It was just simply about making sure that the information was presented, the most accurately, number one, and number two, so that it could be kind of explained as it was presented, and the changes that were literally made up until the last minute.
So I appreciate that, but since it was the mayor's decision, then she should try to convey the reasons why it went down that way as opposed to you doing that. So I appreciate that, though. I would say that, again, my point was that the report, or if it was going to take all of that, then wait a week and make sure that we get it so that we can process it to alleviate any suspicion that there's some sort of attempt to control the process and prevent us from having the information ahead of time, or to give the public the opportunity to digest the information. That was the point that I was trying to make about that. Not saying that there's some desire on your part to control the information or anything like that. That's not what I was trying to convey. I think I have one other piece here, and then I will be done. Because I look at the information that's being presented, and I think that it's good for us to have the information. But looking at the overall likelihood of African Americans to be stopped at like 62% more than our driving demographic suggested we should, right?
Correct.
This is why I'm still saying that whether it's the commission or asking you, same thing I asked Chief Connolly as a predecessor, what's the plan to address this to stop it then? Because it doesn't actually appear to be changing as rapidly as I thought it would be, or we think that it needs to be. So that's the question that I pose to you.
So I think that, for the most part, I think we do a really good job of keeping the citizens of Urbana safe. And I think that we, some of the things that we've incorporated and we've been doing for the last few years, and then more recently some other changes we made in just the last couple years that are trying to help move us in the right direction. I believe we need to continue with the implicit bias training. We've had 2 years of that. It's been well received because we've gotten a presenter that can speak to the officers on a level which they can understand, because it's kind of a hard concept to understand sometimes. So I think continuing with that, and I think we need to do that, is become a part of our annual mandatory training for all police officers. And we have to report that to the state as well. So in addition to that, the fact that we took it upon ourselves several years ago to randomly review traffic stops of officers and sergeants that make traffic stops, and to try to, kind of police ourselves, so to speak, and find problems, and if there's something they're not doing right, and addressing those problems as they come. Now, with the data that we've been getting a lot more recently, we're starting to look at that, and when we see a problem, when we think, oh, you know what, this might be something we need to speak to this particular officer about, we're seeing kind of a trend in something, and we've been having counseling sessions on individual basis with things like that, as opposed to just speaking generally to everybody, hey, this is a problem. No, this particular officer, we speak to you about this particular issue. And so we've been doing some of that here just recently in the past 6 months to a year, since we've been collecting some of this other data with motivation, and continuing to educate and have conversation with the patrol officers at the patrol briefings, which is a time we take at the beginning of every shift to kind of speak about things, learn what happened in the previous shift and stuff like that. We try to have a continuing conversation on a regular basis about these particular things, because the motivation for the stop is subjective, it's not objective, and making sure that everybody understands kind of what that means. What was your motivation for this? Because I could literally take a violation and slide it into any of the 3 categories. So we're trying to make sure we're consistent with that by continuing to talk about it. So I think all of those things are going to have some change effect, but I just don't know how quickly that's going to happen. And I understand that's kind of what you're saying, is it's not changing as rapidly as you would like.
Okay, I'm done.
Eric, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say, I'm perfectly happy. I understand that this is the first stage in the resumption of a conversation about this that's going to continue. I'm completely happy with having my first look at this data in the context of a presentation that helps to interpret it. As far as the intensity of patrolling, I think the conversation that Mr. Ammons and Chief Morgan were having was perhaps hindered by a misconception. The beats are significantly larger than the hot spots. So
Yes.
an officer who is patrolling a beat is likely to be concentrating more, spending more of his or her time on those streets that are hot spots for calls for service. So that accounts for the fact that an officer is assigned to a beat, but is still providing more intensive patrolling where there's higher crime incidents.
Do we have any other questions? Mary Alice?
I have what I think are easy questions. As a newbie, can you describe what a step stop is?
Yes, so a selective traffic enforcement stop is, we put up actual assigned spots where we know we have a high rate of accidents, we know we have a continual problem with speeding, for instance, on Lincoln Avenue and Windsor Avenue. Those are standard ones that we do every single month on multiple times a month because of the issues we have in those particular areas. We also do a lot of cell phone and seatbelt step. That's the acronym, step, running steps, where we'll have officers actually stand out on the street corner in plain clothes and they can see that you're on your cell phone much easier that way than like driving down the street and things like that. So we try to enforce specific issues that we know we have through those overtime assignments, traffic assignments. Does
Okay.
that
All
make
right.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes sense. So basically, a little bit, kind of like you have hot spots here, all right? So you're perhaps focusing more attention on these very specific areas that have high volumes of calls. The same thing is if you have high amount of speeding on Lincoln or on University, you're focusing a bit of attention on that specific item.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And then I was curious because if you, can you go back to the slide that says the disparity in terms of the outcomes?
Yes.
Thank you. So citations and warnings, pretty much 1-to-1. There's not that much difference there. And more serious. So what is more serious? What
So
does
that
that
is something
incorporate?
that elevates beyond a traffic code violation. So if it's a
Is it
DUI,
arrest?
if it's an
Okay.
arrest, if there's a warrant, if there's a drug charge, if there's something that's other than something that's in the vehicle code.
Okay, so that means that it is decreased, and it's not really decreased. I mean, it's within 1 standard deviation for African Americans, but it is significantly increased for Caucasians.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I was wondering if it's at all statistically significant to consider whether the individuals who are stopped, who are processed during these calls, whether it be the pedestrian call or the traffic stop, whether their residence is within Urbana or is it regional. Would that make any difference for the statistics for our city? And perhaps they wouldn't, because it doesn't matter where an individual has come from, whether they've driven across from from Champaign to Urbana or from St. Joseph to Urbana. They're still having a experience in the city of Urbana. So I'm just wondering, because I know that there are neighborhoods where there are multiple calls for assistance by the residents, and it's partly because visitors to the apartment complex who don't live there are the source of the problem. So I'm just trying to sort out whether it's useful to know whether it's people who reside within Urbana, or it's not significant to know that they reside in Urbana, to collect some of the data.
So I did a bit of that. I can look at the residency address of the person that has received the ticket. And so step stops, less likely to live in Urbana. Non-step stops, you're more likely to live in Urbana. When I break it down with the non-step, with the residency and the non-residency, people are still, the stops are still more concentrated on the main thoroughfares, but people that live in Urbana are more likely to be stopped outside of the main thoroughfare. So it's more residential for people that live here, less residential for people that don't.
And would that be true for pedestrian stops, or we don't know yet?
I haven't done
It's
any of the
too
spatial
soon.
stuff with the pedestrian stops. I haven't, the focus currently has been on the traffic stop, but I haven't mapped any of the pedestrian stops yet.
Jared?
I have two things about narratives and one about procedure. I think it would be good, Chief Morgan, if we could hear, I mean, maybe anonymous narrative reports from you guys about, hey, this is a proactive thing that we did to try and help address this, you know, given to us. It's just I don't think we ever hear your guys' side of the story very often. And if you guys are taking proactive measures, like I've never even heard that you guys did that. That was awesome. I'm glad that you're instituting that you're talking to people about it, and you're taking individual action with officers if you see a problem. And that sounds great. It would be great to, I think, and useful for us to know what you guys are doing when you're doing things. One other narrative, but I know I've said this to Martell, but I didn't think of it earlier, but we also need more from our community. We need to hear from people who are experiencing interactions with the Urbana police and hear that side too. I mean, we know your story, Martell, and we've seen you a lot, but we need to hear how this is affecting other folks in the community as well. If you know people who can speak to it, you know, I'd love to hear from them personally. And lastly, just to keep it brief, I don't know if this is a question for Mayor or if this is a question for Council on how we would go about creating a commission to analyze the data and give recommendations to it, but I would fully support that. I don't know how we go about doing that. I just wanted to voice that I would support having that happen.
Mayor, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to speak to that and several other things, and this is regarding the next steps. I know the City Council has spent almost 2 years studying the Traffic Stop Task Force report, and as you saw at the very beginning of the presentation, we've actually implemented many of the recommendations and suggestions that were in the report, and a number of things that weren't in the report. So I think a lot of progress has been made that isn't always recognized often enough. So I'm glad you put that at the very beginning of the report. The recommendation 2.3, which is often alluded to about a commission, as Bill pointed out, the task force said the City Council or an appointed commission, and frankly I think the City Council has spent a great deal of time and energy studying this report, and to start over with a commission would just delay what I think are essential next steps. And I think we're at the point where we should be looking at next steps. I think we have the information that we need. There's one piece that I'll get to in a minute, but as far as the data, I think we have the information that we need. So the recommendations or the next steps that were listed at the end of the presentation, oh, there they are, were actually my suggestions. And the second one is I, as a City Council member listening to this information, I was always thinking in the back of my mind, okay, so what practices, what policies are we talking about that we can tweak, that can have an impact on disparities related to traffic stops? And I think we're at the point now where we actually have to start thinking about that. So I want to get recommendations from City Council members who've been thinking about this for years, and as well as those who are just coming on the council. And I will be meeting with staff to get their recommendations and the public. One piece that hasn't been done is, and it was talked about a number of times, but it was never done, was actually getting out into the community and listening to the community. And that goes to your comments, Jared and Martell's, is what are the experiences, what are the opinions in the community. So discussed this with our Human Relations Officer, Vasilia Clark, Preston James, our community outreach person, and they're working on scheduling neighborhood meetings for September and October, and it's an opportunity for us to do a lot of listening, which I think is the last piece of this that we need to have. And then I want to come back to City Council. I want to compile what we learn through these recommendations, and then come back to City Council with some specific recommendation based on the feedback I'm getting. So I am not inclined to set up a separate commission at this point. I think this council is fully capable of working with me and staff and the community to move us forward. We've kind of been circling around this for 2 years and collecting a whole lot of additional information during that process, but we have enough to work with. And I think at this point we owe it to the community to move forward on this. And I'd like to stay focused on, this is a traffic study and this traffic report, and I'd like to stay focused, first on traffic-related information, because that's what this report was designed to do, and we can bring in the pedestrian as we go along. But I really do think this council and staff and community are capable of moving us to the next steps.
Eric, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to actually suggest a little tweak on that. When I served on the traffic stop study, I immersed myself in mountains of data, studies on police practices. And one of the things that came very clearly, I was actually startled to discover that, and you probably know this very well, Chief Morgan, and maybe you also, that there was at a certain time, there were controlled experiments where people decided to see whether, in fact, more intensive police presence in particular neighborhoods actually reduced crime. So they would take part of the city and they'd have completely even policing, even patrolling without regard for the intensity of crime. And sure enough, and then another part of the city, they had more intensive patrols in neighborhoods with high crime rate. And sure enough, more intensive patrols reduced the crime rate. And nobody's going to do that experiment again. That's absolutely essential in responsible policing, to adjust the patrol, the density. Now, a side effect of that is going to be that you're going to have more traffic stops in those neighborhoods. So I wonder if we should, in our further discussions with the African American community and among ourselves as a total community, if we ought to broaden the scope of our thinking a little bit to look not only at traffic stops, but at the effectiveness of policing, because the patterns of traffic stops and the effectiveness of policing irreducibly go together. And that maybe that's too broad, maybe that's hard to do, but I know, I just know from the research and from what we're seeing here that they're connected to each other.
Any other comments? Bill?
I'd like to reiterate something that we've talked about before and that I'd support would be some kind of community feedback mechanism. I think the numbers don't tell the whole story, but what is kind of the bottom line is how people feel when they're stopped, whether they feel it was justified or not. And that's what impacts people's lives if they feel like they're being watched all the time or being stopped for no reason. So I think that element's missing, and I think that's something we need to try to get at it in some way. And we've mentioned it before, and I understand you don't want to have a survey right after somebody gets a ticket, but other communities have figured out ways to get feedback about whether people thought their stop was justified or not. So I'd like to see something like that if possible. Yeah, I think there was something else, but I forgot. That was the important thing.
Jared, was that it? Would you take the chair for a moment? I have a comment to make.
All right, Dean. Chair recognizes Dean Hazen.
Was that Dude?
Dude.
Okay.
Dean Hazen.
I have a lot to say about the IDOT study. I've been a police officer in Urbana for 15 years, and I was an officer for many years before I came here. I have family members who have been severely victimized in this community. There's a lot that I could offer about this. However, my goal tonight was to run this meeting efficiently, and I'm doing a 50% job of that. That's where I wanted to focus my efforts on. I didn't want to get sidetracked. But I want to invite anybody here to speak with me privately, personally. If you'd like to get my opinion on this, I have a lot to say about it and a lot of input from my experience on the street here. There were some things said, particularly by during public presentation, that were very far off from reality, and I'd welcome the chance to chat with you about that. As far as Sergeant DeFanis, I worked with her for 15 years, and although we've had some differences as coworkers, she is far from a racist or a person who would make a stop based on race. I just want to clear the air on that. That's all I have to say. I'm going to ask you to keep the chair for a moment so I can make a quick trip, and I'll be right back. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Aaron Ammons.
So I think that the last comment also clearly defined for me why the city council should not be the entity that analyzes this information and would allow a group of community folks, maybe ex-police officers or a statistician and other folks, to analyze the information and to actually go through this data painstakingly and actually meet to talk about it and see what sort of ideas or could come out of it. Because to your point of this being about 2.5 years, no other recommendation has come forth from the UPD as to how to address this. And I believe that a commission designed to bring forth policy changes or recommendations to the city council would keep us from having to push through this. Like right now, we've been talking about this for about, I don't know, an hour and a half, and everybody's tired of talking about it now, right? They want to move along. But see, a commission would sit here for another 2 hours if necessary and go through the information and then present a report to us, because we have other business that we have to tend to, right? So if there's a group of volunteers who want to take that on, I believe that that would be a good thing for us, and it would be more fruitful for us to look at this information. And this is why the last statement also helped me to make a point about why you all need to have a better understanding of what implicit bias actually is, okay? It means that, for instance, white folks who have been saturated with white privilege walk around with that privilege, not even knowingly sometimes. They don't even know that they're being racist or defensive. Nobody called Sergeant DeFanis a racist. Nobody ever said that. So why was it necessary for Dean to say that she's not a racist? See, that's the defensiveness that comes up from implicit bias. So we need to understand that that also carries out into our practices as police officers or in our daily lives, right? So that we can actually deal with the issue that's at hand. See, because the issue at hand was that she stopped a person, an African American, who was on a cell phone standing in front of their house. She had, is there a problem? I don't know, did anybody call you? Why would you think there's a problem? Where you going? See, those types of things, right? That's what the issue was. Nobody said that she was racist. We just said that she stopped and didn't appear to have no reason to do so, right? So these are some of the things that we should be able to discuss, and I do not think that this council is going to spend the time actually to dig into that information and that data, allow the commission to make that decision or to bring back some of those recommendations or possible policy changes. I think that would be important. And I don't agree that we should ignore, see, this pedestrian stop thing that just came up. I didn't even know you guys were collecting this information. But obviously, you know, the percentage of black folks in this community, we stopped 423 times, and the white community is 242. That's a major problem, just in and of itself. Do you have any comments about, is this accurate information, Sylvia, that you know of, Chief Morgan, that this is accurate?
From the IDOT traffic, the
Yeah.
pedestrian stop?
Right.
Yeah, that's what we reported to the state.
Okay.
So
So
that would be accurate information
do
on
you
what was
have any-
reportable information for the state. I can't speak to, again, we do collect data on more than what is reportable to the state because we foresaw this possibly being asked. I don't have any of that at my fingertips, and I didn't look it up. Obviously, we were focusing on IDOT traffic stop study, so I don't have any of that to speak to right now. Although the only thing I would say about the pedestrian stop is not just randomly stopping people. There are a multitude of reasons why people are stopped, and we report on, for instance, if we had a call, an armed robbery call or whatever, and we have a description of somebody and we stop somebody in the area. That would be one of those particular things, not just randomly wanting to stop and talk to people. So I just wanted to say there are a whole multitude of reasons that, again, I could speak to it at another time if you would like. I could certainly get some more information
Well,
about that if it were requested.
You spoke to if we got a call that there was an armed robbery in the area and somebody fit the description. What you heard Mr. Miller speak to as someone, officer seeing him standing out in front of his house, bagging up and saying, hey, do you need something? Does that type of thing happen at the Urbana Police Department? Just
If
stopping
it
people,
happened,
asking
we
them
would
where
have
you
a
going?
record of it. If it happened since January of 2016, we would have it recorded.
So then you would be able to produce that interaction then?
Yeah, if I could locate it based on the description and the time and everything that was given, yes.
Okay. I would like for you to do that.
Specific to the Sergeant DeFanis one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I would move to relinquish the chair back to Dean Hazen.
Chair received, sir. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the chief and Melissa Haynes? No questions? Okay. One more time? Any questions?
One last question.
Go ahead, Aaron.
One of the things that was presented around things that have been done to address the concern, and I agree that there are lots of things that have been checked off to address those concerns, this concern, this issue that we're discussing. Then you all went on to list some things that were done outside of the scope, and one of them was the collaboration with Fresh Start. I don't know what the collaboration with Fresh Start has to do with the traffic stop data.
I believe it was one of the recommendations, I don't have it in front of me, speaking about having more interaction with the community, I believe was that. If I had it at my fingertips, I could read it out, but I believe it fit into that category.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
maybe I
Eric.
could quickly clarify that, because I was on the Traffic Stop Study Task Force. We did make some recommendations that weren't strictly traffic. Interaction with the community was one. We got into the cannabis fine business. So we, typical for Urbana folks, we decided to expand the scope of what we were doing.
Okay, looks like that probably sums it up. We thank you for your presentation, unless you have anything further. And it looks like next up is staff reports, if I'm correct. Do we have any staff reports? None at all whatsoever? Really? Okay. Okay, no staff reports. Next up, then, will be ordinance number 2017-07-040, an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate, 1301 East Washington Street. Community Development.
Good evening. Council is considering an ordinance that would authorize the sale of 1301 East Washington Street to the Overland Group LLC for $160,000. The prospective buyer is based in Birmingham, Alabama, and is a preferred developer of Dollar General stores. Their plans are to demolish the existing structure and construct a new retail store at the site. The property's been in the city's possession since 2009, when it was first donated to the city by TriStar Marketing. They had unsuccessfully tried to sell the property for 2 years prior to that donation. The site was considered but ultimately passed over for use by the city and also some local taxing bodies. The city first listed this property for sale back in August of 2016 with Coldwell Banker Devonshire Commercial Realty, here based locally. And the most recent listing price for the property was set at $165,000. This purchase agreement, which is attached to the ordinance, the city would have until August 15th to enact this document as drafted. It would authorize a sale to the Overland Group, who have already signed off on the purchase agreement at a price of $160,000. And they would have up to 180 days to evaluate the property before closing. After closing, the buyer would have 120 days to demolish the property, and after which time the city could begin the initiation of life safety code enforcement. So there's a period of time in which they would likely be demoing the property. The proposed use by the buyer is consistent with the property's B3 zoning. It provides a new retail option for the Philo Road area and to the surrounding neighborhoods, and it's consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, which calls for businesses designed to serve the overall community and the immediate neighborhood. The sale is expected to generate roughly $147,000 in general fund revenue. In addition, the city will eliminate approximately $7,250 per year in property-related expenses. If the sale leads to a project of similar size as the nearby Family Dollar, it would generate roughly $17,000 annually in property taxes for all taxing bodies, $2,000 of which would be city property taxes once the property is fully assessed. The property currently generates 0 property taxes because the city owns it, and we file a tax exemption on it. Staff recommends approval of the ordinance, and I can take any questions you might have.
I believe Aaron was first. Go ahead, Aaron.
Do they have to, thanks Brandon for the presentation, and I know there's a long history with this property. Does the company Overland Group have to build a Dollar General based upon this agreement?
No. They would be obligated to bring the property up to code within 120 days, or they would be subject to city code enforcement at that time. But it is a sale of the property.
So they could
there's no agreement beyond that.
They could just tear it down and keep the grass cut, and that'll be fine?
Yes, per the purchase agreement, that's correct. But that would be an improvement over what is there, and it would require about a $70,000 investment just to get it to that point. So I think we would, and it would be taxable at that point as well.
Bill.
Just to follow up on that, in paragraph 26,
Sorry.
it says, intended use, buyer and seller are in agreement that the property may only be purchased by Overland Group LLC and or assigns for the development of a Dollar General store.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, it is a little more specific than I'd anticipated then, yeah. So,
okay, so they do have to build a Dollar General store.
yeah, I presume so.
Okay.
But that is purely their intent as a buyer.
Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, if they do some more research and find, and maybe with our help, might decide that some other use there would be more beneficial to the neighborhood or to the city, we could amend this agreement easy enough.
Well, yes, I mean, they actually would not, during the 180 days after this purchase agreement is enacted, they'll do their due diligence and decide if they want to proceed with the Dollar General store. If not, they simply wouldn't close on the property. And we would be in a position to put it back on the market.
Okay. I mean, I did look at their website, and they do developments of other things besides Dollar General. It might be worth having that discussion with them, especially if we have any market data that, I mean, just looking at the corner, you know, Hirachis does very well there, and there may be other uses that could be better for that corner. So, and also on that corner, there's like a mature oak tree, several mature cypress trees, some ginkgos, some really nice ginkgos, and then some pines. I don't care so much about the pines. And I understand they're going to want to cut a lot of those down so people can see their sign from halfway down Washington Street. What kind of ability do we have to negotiate or incentivize preservation of the trees? I don't think any of them are on city property, as far as I could tell from the aerial photos and stuff.
I'm not sure that we would have any beyond what the city can do when there's a tree being cut down on private property normally.
So we can specify that they have to build a Dollar General store, but we can't tell them to try to preserve some trees.
I'm not sure that we have the foresight to know what their site planning would require for tree removal. The city's goal has been to sell the property and to make it taxable again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, So for the $2,000 a year, maybe it's worth it. Then as far as the listing agreement goes, I understood that when the thought was to list it, one of the proposals from one of the local brokers was to, for an upfront fee, do some marketing study and then target specific businesses that might be appropriate for that corner. And the reason that we didn't do that was because the administration at the time decided that it wasn't worth that fee. Is that right?
Yes, we did not consider proposals that required upfront expenditures. It would have required general fund expenditures.
Okay. And, I mean, I think sometimes a little bit investment for the future might be worth it. So I'd encourage going forward for people to consider a more, maybe more thoughtful or proactive way of marketing city property if we ever have that situation again. And for the listing agreement itself, if we decide not to sell this, even though the broker has brought forward a willing buyer at the price that we've set, would we have to pay commission?
If the
Some
sale
listing
doesn't go
agreements,
through?
I guess, specify that if the broker brings forward a willing buyer and we say no, that they've done their job, so we have to pay the broker commission anyway. Do you know if our listing agreement happens to do that, or is it more open? They would have to close on the sale before they get a commission?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Could you find out before next meeting?
Sure.
Thank you.
Dennis, I apologize, you were supposed to go next. Go ahead.
And guess what? Bill actually asked the question I was going to raise. I was concerned, well, first of all, I would say that it's a little bit disappointing to think that a Dollar General store will be occupying the location that probably could be a great retail site for other kinds of business, including restaurant or grocery or other kinds of service for the community. And I'm thinking about the potential that the Lehrman Neighborhood Action Committee envisioned for it back in 2008 when it first became a discussion about what to do with the building, when it was being held as a possible swap building for the Urbana School District administrative site. The Lehrman neighborhood at that time advocated that it become a community center that offered community services, meeting rooms, and other facilities, with the idea that that they could engage neighborhood businesses and non-for-profits to pool their energies to clean up the building and convert it into something of great use to the community. But that conversation died for lack of support in the city, and now we are looking at a property that's going to become redundant use of services that are available just a couple hundred yards down the block. And my other concern was the preservation of the mature trees that are on the land. It's a well-landscaped and rather attractively landscaped piece of property with a lot of flower beds and variety of trees. And I'm afraid to see that the prime interests of the new retailer is going to be to clear-cut everything so that their block building will be seen from multiple corners. And I'm just wondering if there is not a way that we can preserve some of the mature trees that are on that property, to which has a kind of a park-like appearance from the triangle formed by Philo Road and Washington. And if there's nothing that we can do, or the arborist can suggest to allow that to be part of the negotiation, I would be disappointed.
Thank you, Dennis. Anybody else? Eric?
Yeah, I was traveling, so I haven't been part of the earlier conversations about this, but I'll just say something about demographics of Dollar General. I think all of us would love to have a community where everybody shopped really upscale. But we don't. I think there is a niche for Dollar General demographics. The other aspects of this, I mean, I'd like the site to look nice and so forth, but it's really okay with me for there to be a Dollar General.
Okay, do we have any recommendations for this ordinance? Anybody? Bill, you're on the tip of one.
Sure, I'll move to send this ordinance to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll
because it will
second
probably
that.
be approved.
Okay, so move to send to City Council for approval by Bill, seconded by Eric.
No discussion.
Any further discussions? Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Yeah, so before I was just asking questions, but now it's in discussion with, to Eric's point, I agree that there are, you know, Dollar General is a good store, so is Family Dollar, and so is Dollar Tree, which we have both of within walking distance of that store. And there's nothing wrong with having that. It's just that for that neighborhood, that middle Urbana neighborhood that just recently formed a group, neighborhood association, I think sometimes people underestimate the expendable income because they look at the housing values or something and they say, you know, these houses are, the average value is 120,000 or something, so maybe it's a lower income neighborhood. And especially for big companies from out of town, you expect them to do that. They look at the demographics and everything. But part of our job as council members, as community development and economic development staff, is to see the holes in that argument and point out that, you know, a lot of these areas are really good locations. They're close to the university and to downtown. Some of the houses were built you know, years ago and well taken care of. That's why they haven't been torn down and replaced, is because it's a neighborhood that takes care of their homes, and so a lot of the people retire. A lot of them are first-time home buyers, dual incomes, or people that don't have kids yet, and they actually do have quite a bit of expendable income. And I think we also have the tools available to us through the EDC to analyze from a market perspective where the gaps are in retail for a specific area. And I don't think this would show a gap in dollar type stores because there's already pretty sufficient coverage there. So I don't know. I mean, I think Dollar General will do well there. I don't know how long Family Dollar would last after Dollar General opens. Maybe they can both survive there. So then maybe we'd have an opportunity for redevelopment there. But I don't expect to oppose this. I think that you know, it's a fair price for it. It would be nice for the city not to have to worry about potential liability issues, either from the buildings or from anything else that might be there. So I just I wish the process had worked out differently, and I hope there's still an opportunity to talk to this developer to see if they would, if they already have a commitment, and it's too late, but if they, you know, have other options where they could put a Dollar General and use this for something else they'd like to develop, and if we can help them find the investors to make that happen, that would be an ideal situation.
Could I offer a response? I just want to make sure the council's aware of an important distinction between staff's process on this property versus a site like Block North. Block North was intentionally acquired by the city over a period of several years and is, you know, within a TIF district, within an area in which there's a lot of emphasis on redevelopment efforts. And the process by which we try to guide development on a property that, you know, we own that one as well, is usually a request for proposal process where we select a developer and then we have great control through the entire process, normally entering into a development agreement. And typically when we do that, we want to have incentives we're offering along the way. For this parcel, though, the instructions that really came out of the years of conversation on this were that this is an asset the city is not able to utilize. It has a liability associated with it. It's not generating any tax revenues, and we need to dispose of this asset. So staff considered auction and a broker, and again, the course all along has been to try to dispose of an asset not to control the development outcome because we have very little ability to do that in this instance. We would have greater control if the city was willing to expend the money to demo the existing building and put that property on the market with an RFP. But again, we don't have assets for that because this property is not in a TIF district. It would require general fund expenditures, and that is, my understanding, not a priority currently or in the immediate future will be a priority for general fund expenditures. So I just want to give that little bit of context. I don't disagree with anything that's being said, but there's a trajectory and a history of this property that is difficult to change without more guidance and direct action by council.
Do we have any further questions or discussions on this? Mary Alice?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, that means that we wouldn't be able to put any stipulations on the purchase agreement in terms of making sure that the landscaping is, they're able to keep as much of the trees and so forth. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
I believe that adding such a stipulation would probably, I mean, I think it's akin to the council simply voting down the purchase agreement, because I'm not really sure how we would stipulate which trees would need to be saved. That would require a process of review. And this is getting then into a territory where the buyer might become uncomfortable with the amount of control the city would like to have on the outcome at the site. Again, this has been listed as a property for sale, not as a site for redevelopment or a partnership sort of an opportunity. So I think it would be difficult to achieve that in the purchase agreement context and in the normal context of a real estate deal.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thanks.
sorry.
No.
Any further questions? Okay. I'd like to take a vote then for ordinance number 2017-07040. All those in favor of sending this ordinance to City Council for approval, say aye.
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 All those that disagree, same sign. Seeing none, the ordinance passes. Next is resolution number 2017-07046R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for annual Urbana Sweet Corn Festival, Urbana Business Association, fiscal year 2017-2018, community development again.
So just as an introduction, we'll hear from 4 different groups. First, the Urbana Business Association will speak to this item, the Sweet Corn Festival, and then we'll hear from Pygmalion Tech Conference, Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots Fest, and lastly, First Fridays festivals in downtown. And that last item involves the last 2 items. So just as a preface, we'll have 5-minute presentations from each presenter, and then council questions as well. And so we have Paris Balderrada here, the Executive Director of the Urbana Business Association, to speak to the Sweet Corn Festival proposal.
Step on up, Paris.
It's way past my bedtime. So, yeah, I'm Paris Balderrada, Executive Director of Urbana Business Association, and I'm here to present on Sweet Corn Festival, and I know I've presented several times this year already, but what I'm going to speak to is actual specifics of what we have going on for Sweet Corn this year. Quick history, it's Champaign County's largest free annual festival, started in 1975 in the Busey parking lot. Over 50,000 people attend each year, 20,000 ears of corn are consumed, over 70 vendors, live music, kids activities, and a car show, and that's the history of it. We actually have a lot more going on this year. We do have several different vendors. This year we've taken the festival local, so all of our vendors are from within the state of Illinois with a concentration on central Illinois in our community. We have a lower pricing structure that allowed the vendors our local vendors to participate. Food, merchandise, informational, and nonprofit vendors will be joining us this year. So entertainment for this year, on the main stage, we have booked all local entertainment. So we have a variety of different local artists that are going to be playing R&B, classic rock, and a variety of original and covers. So we see here we have Love Sign, ESP, Kings Highway, Andy Moe, Candy Foster, tons of fun. We are going to have a special appearance, a guitar appearance from representing Elnora, the Guitar Festival from Cranert this year, and Boat Drunks. We also have a lot more entertainment on several other stages as well. We have the Folk and Roots stage, who will have 8 different performances from Friday and Saturday, 6 to 11 each night. And then we have our One Community Together stage, also on Saturday. From 11 to 6 p.m., we'll have 8 different performances as well, such as one of the ones where all the high school marching bands get together, and they will have a performance on Saturday around 6 o'clock. And we have expanded our family-friendly activities. So one of the ones we're really excited about this year is on Saturday afternoon, we're going to have the Corn Classic Corn Eating Contest. We will have 3 different rounds. We'll have one for kids, one for women, and one for men. And so the adults will have to eat as many ears of corn as they can in 5 minutes, and the children in 3 minutes. And we will have different prizes for everyone. We'll have cornhole games, CU Adventures in Time and Space. We'll do a puzzle hunt. So they're going to arrange different puzzles and games around the festival. And people can go through in the best time, the most puzzles solved, and there'll be different prizes for everybody there as well. Of course, we have action inflatables, face painting, guitar pick bracelet making, painting of the Elnora mural, virtual reality games, and several other kids activities that will be throughout the entire festival. Oh, we can't forget the Motormaster Car Show as well, so that'll be on Saturday. And this year we've actually, keeping with the theme of local and incorporating our downtown bars and businesses, the drink process is going to be a little different. We actually partnered with 9 different of our downtown bars. So this year we will be selling a Sweet Corn Festival cup, and once you purchase that cup, that'll allow you to purchase drinks in any of our downtown bars, any mixed drink, any beer, and then you can take that drink out onto the festival to listen to music, and then you can go back into another bar, listen to the music that they have going on. So this allows people to interact with our different downtown bars, the food specials that they have going on, the entertainment that they have going on, as well as wandering our festival streets as well. We are virtually ticketless this year, so you only need to buy tickets for our festival beer stands, our corn tent, and the cornhole games. Less tickets equals less weight. And it also means that our food vendors keep 100% of the profits. Volunteers, every year over 500 volunteers are needed to make the Sweet Corn Festival happen, so we still have plenty of opportunities at the corn tent, beer stands, and all of our different activities, cleanup, volunteer check-in, vendor check-in. So if anybody's interested, they can visit the Urbana Sweet Corn Festival website and sign up with a form from our website to volunteer as well. And then, of course, we can't forget our sponsors. Every year, we have over 40 businesses that help sponsor the festival in cash and in-kind. And I do want to point out, I did put an updated spreadsheet for you guys for the 2016 sponsors. There was a formula that was wrong in the packet, so there's an updated number on the actual final total of last year's. So, of course, the agreement, we are asking for up to $15,000, just depending on the outcome of the festival. So we're actually hoping to only receive $10,000 from the city, because that means the festival has done very well this year. So again, if you need more info, you would visit urbanasweetcornfestival.com for more details. And then I just want to thank you for allowing me to present. And then, of course, tomorrow evening, we have another networking event for Collider Cowork. It's a new business in downtown Urbana. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Paris. Do we have any? Aaron, go ahead.
I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I'm trying to see if I can get some other folks who come in, maybe some young people to volunteer. Is there an age limit on volunteering?
We normally start about high school age is our youngest group of people that we take. So starting like freshman, sophomore year in high school is fine.
Are there any perks for volunteering for them?
Yes, there is, actually. You get free food, drink, T-shirt, and then if you are with an organization and you have 8 or more people, then you can actually wear your own T-shirt from your organization, put marketing materials out on the station that you are volunteering at as well, and then we put you on our website.
And then the other thing was about the performance. Is there an average cost that you could share that each act would cost?
I know that the total that for our main stage that we're spending is $63.50. So it ranged $400 or $500. I think the most expensive one was $2,000. So, yeah.
And all of them are local, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
You mentioned several different genres of music. I'm familiar with a couple of them, and I didn't see I don't know. I don't know them all, but you said there would be some R&B and some other stuff that would be played. I would see Candy Foster playing that. I don't know about everybody else.
Actually, Andy Moe, he does some type of music like that. Let me see who else. Then, let's see, we've got the rock, the classic rock. So Kings Highway does originals. Andy Moe does originals. ESP does some covers on some rock. And then, yeah, it's a variety. And because a lot of them will do covers, and then they'll just do across the board on different things. Yeah.
Any other questions? Dennis?
So one of the differences that you're proposing for this year is the involvement of the local bars providing the beer. So does that mean that there won't be a generic beer distributor on the street, that they're going to go into the bars to get their drink?
It's both.
It's
So we
both.
will still have, we'll have less beer stands, and we'll open later on Saturday. So instead of us being open starting at 11, the festival beer stands will open at 6, and we have 2 less this year than we did in the past because we want to push that business into our bars and let them gain those revenues.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that they're going to appreciate that opportunity, and that's really fair, and I think that does engage the community at the real basic level of, our own retailers being participants. And I've always been most excited about the music produced at the community stage and the folk and road stage, because those truly are local programming with a lot of variety, from student performances, C4A, musical groups, to, the Balinese gamelan performance was there one year or 2 years. So there's a lot of variety of genres at the community stage and at the folk and road stage. And have you laid out the distribution of the stages in a way that will allow the folk and road stage not to have to tear down?
Yes.
So that's an option for them, not to have to tear down their stage.
Yeah, so they'll be able to
re-erect it?
keep it up the entire festival.
Great.
So the reconfiguration of the layout has allowed them to just stay set up the entire time, so they don't have to worry about setup and tear down.
And that's a huge benefit for them. They're a huge public service musical provider, and I know they do get a little bit of money, but it hardly offsets all the energy it takes to set up, take it down, set up again, and then take it down again.
Yeah.
Which nobody else had to do. So great, I'm so glad you did that for them.
Eric?
It sounds and looks as though you've taken into account a tremendous number of concerns and issues that people have brought to you. And really, it seems like a new and improved festival. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Okay, Jared. Mary Alice, go ahead.
And maybe this is a better question for Brandon. So one of the things in terms of the discussion on here says that the city has benefited greatly from the Sweet Corn Festival and so forth. One of the things in there, it says it's generated revenue in the form of hotel motel taxes and food and beverage taxes. I can see where it would generate sales tax from food and beverage taxes, but I'm curious, is there a lot, do we see an uptick in people staying in hotels and motels during the festival?
No, I believe it's probably minimal, the amount of hotel motel tax that's being generated as a direct result of this.
Okay. Have we ever had an estimate on how much sales tax? we
Normally,
generate?
I mean, Visit Champaign County can do these kinds of estimates, and they do for groups. I think one of our folks here had an estimate done, but it would still be based on a multiplier. There's not a good way to directly measure that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Jared?
Hey, Paris.
Hey.
How's it going? My best wishes to all of my festival promoters who are in here this evening, and thanks you guys for sticking around. You guys all have families and lots of other things to do, but we appreciate everything you guys are doing to help benefit the city. And I, as a former festival promoter myself, understand the amount of work and effort that goes into pulling these things off. So I greatly appreciate all of your guys' efforts, and thanks for sticking around to talk to us about it. Two things. I mean, we're not going to know until after. I know you're changing a lot of things this year, and I wish you the best of luck, Paris. I hope these all work out well. And I know you're changing the formula of it in a pretty dramatic way. So, I hope that this will be a success, and I'll be interested to hear about how the traveling cups work out, going from bar to bar in downtown, and how everybody ends up feeling about those.
I like that, the traveling cup.
Yeah.
You should have named it that.
I hope bartenders will be, if any bartenders are watching, I hope you guys are prepared to be washing cups, because people are going from one kind of drink to another, and they want this at this place, and they want that at that place. I mean, I just looking at my own logistics and being like, oh my goodness, these people coming in with these things. So it'll be interesting to see what people think about it after it's actually happened, and whether or not they feel like, the boon in business, which I'm sure will drive, will be far more than the hassle of all the cups and trying to keep track of that stuff. The only other thing I was going to say is that I've actually booked a lot of these bands, and I was really surprised to see your lineup. Love Candy, he's awesome, and I think what you were looking for, Aaron, was blues music. A lot of these guys are big blues guys, and there's going to be a lot of blues at this festival. It almost looks similar to festival lineups I've worked on before, so that was pretty cool. Anyway, my best of luck to you, and I hope that with all these dramatic changes that it works out.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a recommendation for this resolution?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we send Resolution 2017-07-046. It's a marketing agreement with, for the annual Sweet Corn Festival to council with approval.
Second.
Okay, moved by Dennis, seconded by Eric. Yes, thank you. Do we have any discussion before we vote on that? Mary Alice?
So in this, it says that we're entering in this on the first day of July. Does that matter? Should that be updated before we move it to council?
Good point.
Promotional marketing agreement for annual Urbana Sweet Corn Festival. Does it matter if the date is not correct? That's my question.
Eric?
I think, actually, the mayor or Brandon should answer this, but I'll take a stab at it. I think it's because the fiscal year began July 1st. And so it's, so it would be dated as of the fiscal year.
That's correct. It's a boilerplate agreement to apply for the fiscal year.
Okay. All right. And then my second question was number 3 on there, in-kind services. So separate from the up to $15,000 that we're committing to in this agreement, there's also the in-kind services which should not exceed $10,000. I assume that's for blocking off the streets and putting up barriers, but what else does that include?
That is actually based entirely on the services related to the street closure provided by Public Works staff. That includes racking, and then I think for this event, our Public Works staff do some of the setup and tear down of the racking and cleaning as well.
Okay.
Clean up or tear down.
And so do we end up paying people overtime?
Yeah, I expect so. Yeah,
So that would be included in the 10,000, the cost of?
Yeah, our operations manager, John Collins, can he'll give me estimates down to the dollar of you know how much time he expects these to factor. for
So
his
since
staff.
it's listed in kind, I guess my question is about the budget. If we're paying people overtime to do these services, how is that accounted for in the budget?
It's not exclusively accounted for, and the city's been doing it since the festival began.
No, let me rephrase. I'm sorry. So basically, in the budget, we have a certain number of personnel, right? It's an HR line. That's how much money we pay people. So I'm assuming we account for that expenditure every year when we do the salaries. Is that correct?
And Elizabeth can explain for you.
Yeah, so to the extent that it's done on regular time, that's part of the budgeted salaries, but I think it's also accounted for in the Public Works overtime budget to the extent that they require overtime to do it.
Okay.
They've been doing it for a lot of years. We have not, we did not reduce their overtime budget this year, so it should be sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
Elizabeth, you might want to stay there. Just to follow up on that, I had kind of the same thought when I was going through basically all these agreements, is that Public Works ends up basically contributing a lot to our marketing effort through in-kind services. Is there a way to track that outside the budget, or is it advisable to track it outside the budget? Would you, if we wanted to track it, would we do it as budget transfers from one department to another?
Well, as you probably know, we can't do budget transfers between departments. That requires a budget amendment approved by the council. So, yeah, at this point with our current financial system, that would basically have to be some kind of manual tracking on a spreadsheet outside the system. In the future, once we've implemented our new financial system, we could assign a project code and track it through a project code.
Because that would even make a difference, say, when we're looking at profitability of the Civic Center or something, depending on how many times we've given out free Civic Center rentals and used it for ourselves for meetings, for the developers' meetings and things like that. If that was credited to that budget somehow, maybe we aren't actually losing money. I mean, that's just an example on the Civic Center. But yeah, I guess, yeah, looking forward, I would be interested in exactly how much Public Works is contributing toward marketing in-kind services.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can chat with Bill. I suspect they have a pretty good idea about that.
Aaron?
Yeah, so this would be consistent, and I do think Seth tried to address this in the presentation from Pygmalion, that it doesn't seem like a whole lot, 5,000 or 10,000 from the overall budget, but when you have 4 or 5 different entities coming asking for that amount and some other folks coming to ask for more, I still don't see, and I need to see more clear impact on the businesses. I think it's great. I used to go to Sweet Corn Fest, and it's mind-boggling to me why the businesses weren't open in the evening time with all these people out there. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to logically conclude that there's definitely going to be an impact there. I just think that it would be great to see that impact, even for future marketing and that type of thing. But just to say, yeah, you know, we have 50,000 people here or 20,000 people must have did something for us, I just don't think that's not concrete enough. So I know that we'll get a little bit of that from the Pygmalion presentation. Still not as detailed as I would like, but it'll be something like that, I'm sure. So,
Dennis, go ahead.
And the other group that comes forward to interact with us on a regular basis is the Folk and Roots Festival, and many of their venues are the bars, and the bars do the business of alcohol sales. So it might be possible to get some of that information actually from past experiences with the Oaken Roots Festival, because that's all they do, is they don't provide any kind of liquor.
Okay, it's getting late. Jared, you have one more? I think we're going to have to start speeding it up here. We're going to be here all night, but go ahead.
So I just had one question. This is a budget line item. We already have 10,000 committed to the festival, correct? This is an additional ask on top of what was already approved from budget before, or no?
When council approves the budget for this kind of an expenditure, there's still a separate action required in form of authorization of such an agreement as this.
So this is the one we did before?
Basically, this is the same agreement that council approved last year with the dates changed for the current fiscal year. This Sweet Corn Agreement's approved every year.
Yeah, the budget specifies how much is allocated, and this agreement that you're acting on tonight actually authorizes that expenditure.
And did we move that was the motion for the whole 15, or was it for 10? How much was it for? Or did somebody just move it without a specification on a dollar amount?
I didn't move it with any specific dollar amount, but the ask is in the request ordinance, right?
And the draft agreement specifies for it's 15,000, 10,000 is on a reimbursement basis. The 5,000 is only reimbursed if the festival does not perform economically. So as Paris said, she's hoping they only receive 10,000 because she's hoping to perform.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, with no further discussion, all in favor of sending this resolution to City Council for approval, say aye.
Aye.
All who disagree, same sign. Seeing none, it moves forward. Next resolution, resolution number 2017-07047R, resolution approving the authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for, what is it? Pygmalion Technology Conference. Fiscal year 2017-2018, community development.
We have Seth Fine and Patrick Singer from
Pygmalion.
Good, everyone. Hi. Is this on? Yeah, okay. So, hello again, and hello to the new members. It's nice to see public service changing over like that. So Pygmalion is entering its 13th year. Much to my wife's happiness and to Patrick's happiness, we did not add any new components this year. We kept it 5, despite my addiction. But we've expanded some things. Every year's an experiment for us. We really like to play around with the scope of what this thing can be. And this year, I'm going to, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to keep to what we're doing in Urbana and what our goals are for the future. So in Urbana, we're going to be back again on Thursday, September 21st at Cranach Center for the Performing Arts, which is very much in Urbana. And that will start at 8 a.m. and go all the way until midnight, at which time there'll be a post-show at the Canopy Club, which will go until 2 a.m. So it's really a full day. It starts with an event called Share the Vision. I don't know. All right, so maybe I should go through this thing. So you have this. I'm going to give you the whole thing if you want. It's my company with my wife. Patrick is becoming a partner. 2005, 13th year. More gray hair. Here's the budget. This is the budget that we've projected this year, which is up about $50,000 from last year. If those numbers seem surprising, let me assure you that it's still under what we wish that we could do based on the type of event that we're putting on by comparison to what we're working on nationwide, worldwide. The type of event this is generally double, if not quadruple and higher. Glad to discuss that in further questions. The outcome here is that last year we had about 15,000 patrons. The great people at Visit Champaign County put together a study, you know, I think it's the best that we can probably say, and I think that I really agree with you, Aaron, and everyone else who is skeptical of these numbers. I mean, like, I don't know what, I mean, there's no possible way that anyone can really do that, but we have to go based on, you know, what the people who do this job say is the best possible way to, you know, do that. I mean, I can tell you that a lot of hotels come after us for a partnership, and we only choose a couple because we try to represent well to each one of our partners. Lots of folks eat in a lot of restaurants. I don't know how to say it. I know personally, I know, you know, probably over 100 people personally after 13 years of doing this that come to town each year for it. Friends from Iowa City, friends from DC. It's just like part of their year. So that's good. You know, that's what happened. We're proud of that. That's something that we feel, you know, really strongly about. The request that we have is the same as last year, $5,000 cash sponsorship, in addition to use of the festival racking from Public Works. The festival is 2 months away. We tend to plan these things many, many, many months in advance, and so at the recommendation of Brandon and other folks at the city, I went ahead and, as I have for the past 6 years, spoke with John Collins, and assuming that this is an agreement that Urbana's into, we've already worked out how my staff will pick up and drop off the festival racking, so no additional cost to the taxpayers or for overtime on Public Works. But to go back to what we're actually doing, in Urbana on Thursday, September 21st, we're extraordinarily excited about what we have planned. We partner with an organization at the University of Illinois that is presenting from the Office of Informational Technology. They're doing an event called Share the Vision. We negotiated with them to bring that to Krannert Center away from a different venue in a different city. That's the best I can offer. And we wanted it to be at Krannert Center because we thought it really fit well with what we were doing that day. It's 25 different researchers and professors from the University of Illinois, all given 20 minutes to speak about what it is that they're working on, what they're teaching, and true to the name, what their vision is for their next coming years in their work. And that takes place from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. That concludes with a happy hour at Krannert Center Stage 5 Bar, at which time Patrick has curated a tech demo of 16 different interactive and innovative booths where virtual reality, robotics, drones, help me out.
Well, there's just all sorts of different types of innovations that we've had. Based on that, you know, we have virtual reality, flight simulators, robotics, wearables, video games, those sorts of things. So the goal of the demo, as this is the third year we've done it, is to really focus on the local entrepreneurial community. So based on that idea, we've expanded that small component of the tech portion to fold in not just professional entrepreneurs and innovators like Volition or other variety of companies in town, but really engage with the student population, not just at the University of Illinois, but also with the school district. So it's in our it's a really big initiative for us this year to incorporate students from District 116 and Unit 4 schools this year to showcase what they're working on and to provide a place that they can contribute and interact with not just other students and patrons, but other professionals that are living here in town and students. So that's all at Krannert, right in the lobby throughout the evening from 5:30 to 9:30.
And so quickly, we're also partnering with the University Library to do the Human Library again, which is something that I'll ask that you look up because it's really interesting. A headline author, George Saunders, who wrote a book called Lincoln and the Bardo, is reading, and then two different performances, one from Julian Baker and one from Thundercat, who, Aaron, you really got to go see. And then late that night, Canopy is a really, really sensational hip-hop artist from St. Louis who is doing some really important stuff, an act named Smino. It's in the Cranach Center District. It's not in downtown. We have every intention, especially in light of some of the really cool stuff that's been happening in downtown Urbana over the course of the past couple of years, thanks to folks like Imbibe and opening up of Blackbird. You know, we really want to see Pygmalion come back to downtown Urbana. It's in our interests. It's in the community's interests. And so in 2018, we'll be talking about that with you again and seeing how we can incorporate some of the great smaller venues to be able to showcase the downtown Urbana scene. For this year, we've gone out of our way to work with JSM, who has been a longtime partner and sponsor of Pygmalion, and we're really going to focus on highlighting the restaurants and businesses in Gregory Place, in addition to Manolo's Pizza, Espresso Bread Company, and Tim Ponies as like, here's where you come, and there's like a lot of like really great selections of restaurants and places to hang before and after and during the shows. So sorry for going long. I get it. Sorry.
Any questions? Mary Alice.
All right. So I'm not picking on the other people. So I have two questions for you. The first one is that on the Visit Champaign County, the estimate there. So you have $86,772 in local taxes. Did they break it down between Champaign and Urbana?
No, but I'm not going to like sit here and like try to tell you anything that's not true. Like a majority of the festival takes place in Champaign. So certainly I would say with definition, more of those go into Champaign.
So would you say 10/90? Would you say 80/20?
I'm not an analyst, and I can't sit here and pretend that I can.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
can tell you
That's
that
fine. I was just curious if you had
Sure,
a
I can
feel.
tell you that the festival is the bulk of the festival is 3 days. 1 day is in Urbana, and 2 days are in Champaign. As far as expenditure and what we're putting into each day financially, it's genuinely about 1/3 to 2/3.
Okay, all right. And then my second question was in the in-kind contribution. So it's listed at 15,000. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a rough estimate that we put together a few years back, and what we're really trying to do is find good ways to make sure that the city of Urbana is represented in the same way that the city of Champaign is represented. We're trying to go horizontal with as many of our community partners as possible, especially the ones that we feel are vital to the health and the growth of the event. So we did an estimate based on what we think it might cost to have to rent that racking. It's probably a little high, but that said, I think it's fair given the other relationships that we have with the city over the course of time. We feel strongly that City of Urbana is a presenting partner alongside of Champaign, alongside Cranach Center, alongside Research Park, and other companies. Oh, there you go.
So a large part of it is with the rental, what we would, it's not for like all the personnel.
There's
It's,
no.
Well, this is a fair market valuation. I mean,
Gotcha.
that's our goal.
All right.
Same
Okay.
with Sweet Corn. And it's also important that council know that these services that are being provided to these groups, that we're trying to quantify in these agreements, because we are trying to holistically define the whole relationship here with them. We are providing these same in-kind services at a city to the marathon, to neighborhood block parties, to all kinds of smaller events. So it's not that only these groups are getting support from Public Works for street closures. So I want to be clear about that. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's a great festival, and I
Thank
will always, always regret not seeing one of the artists a couple of years ago, and I wish you would bring her back.
Which one?
Dessa.
Sorry.
I love Dessa.
It makes you feel any better. I paid too much for it. That's not true. Actually, it was a fair price. I'm thinking about it. Good.
I just have two comments. One is you should never apologize for holding an event in the Cranach District and on Gregory Street.
Sure.
That is also Urbana in as much as any other part of this city, and actually we don't celebrate that area of town enough or take advantage of what's there enough. So don't apologize for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe I'm just used to feeling that way.
Well, you don't have to
Okay,
anymore.
I appreciate
It's a
it.
new day here.
It is a new
And
day.
secondly, if it weren't for Pygmalion, I would not have read the book Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, or Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, or seen one of the most remarkable presentations I've ever seen. So that was a great opportunity last year, and I think this sounds like it'll be another one this year.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. Thanks.
Eric.
So I'm excited to hear that George Sanders will come and will read from Lincoln in the Bardo.
Yeah, well, it hasn't been defined. We keep kind of asking. He's a little mysterious. I mean, He's a little mysterious about what he wants to do. And my guess is that he'll probably read from it. But I think he lectures. I mean, he's as far as the literature world is concerned this year and now, I mean, he's in high demand. That Jody Stanley and the Department of English were able to attract him through some relationships is kind of mind-boggling. And so we don't know. So I guess you should probably RSVP for a seat because, quite frankly, it's going fast.
I am experiencing Lincoln in the Bartow in an audiobook.
I've heard that.
From Nick Offerman
Yeah.
and David Sedaris.
Yeah.
And that is an incredible experience to hear them interpret that book.
And Nick Offerman and Megan Mullally, his wife, optioned it, so they bought the rights to the movie, and I believe that they're starting filming this fall.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a cool little local connection.
Jared.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Seth, about doing more next year at Urbana.
Yeah.
I look forward to working with both you and Patrick on building this forward and bringing it back to Urbana.
We'd sure like that. I mean,
but in any case, we'll keep it short. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks so much, you guys, for everything you do.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any recommendations for this resolution?
I will happily recommend that this gets moved forward to a council with for approval.
I will delightedly second that.
Okay, moved by Jared, seconded by Eric. Then, do we have any further discussion? I hope not, because I'm old. Okay, with that said, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor for moving it to council, say aye.
Aye.
All those against it, same sign. Seeing none, it is moved to council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up, resolution number 2017-07048R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for the 2017 Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots Festival. Fiscal year 2017-2018, community development once again. Hello.
How's everybody doing?
All right.
So my name is Rob Crum, and Francis Harris is with me, and we're volunteers. We've been working on the festival pretty much since year one, and so I have a couple comments just to make. I lived in Urbana since 1980, and this town is a good town, and one of the reasons this festival came together is pretty much so we could show off the town and show off our local talent and kind of put the spotlight on what Champaign-Urbana has to offer. And from year one, this festival has been a downtown Urbana event. So that's where it's going to stay. And I have a saying that I like to tell people is, my school is old school, all right? So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. But what you have in front of you is the program from last year for the festival. And I think this document speaks very well to what's going on. We're going to talk about that. And you also have this bright yellow piece of paper. And these are all the artists that we've signed for the festival that's coming up this year. So
So far.
So far. So you can look at that maybe a little later. But so yeah, let's just talk a little bit about the festival. So the festival will be November 2nd through 4th. And we always start the festival with a kickoff event at the Krannert Center on Thursday night. And then Friday and Saturday, everything's in downtown Urbana. Friday evening from about 5 till midnight, and then really all day on Saturday. And we concentrate all the events indoors because of the timing, but we use a small cluster of businesses and other facilities that are pretty much right in easy walking distance in downtown Urbana. We have events at the Rose Bowl, at the Community Center for the Arts, and Pizza M, the Urbana Free Library, Iron Post, and Independent Media Center. And we like having the festival in downtown Urbana because it's very accessible, and it's very easy to just get to downtown Urbana. You can walk everywhere, really. So so this will be the ninth annual festival, so we're already kind of planning for year 10. That'll be next year. And the festival really started with a group of local people, mostly all musicians, and I have to say major shout out to Brenda Koenig. It was really her idea. Brenda's a local fiddle player. You've probably interacted with her in the past. Like I said, the festival is all volunteers, so we really want to celebrate the richness of the local music scene and get people to come here, hopefully spread the word about the community. And that's really the dynamic that we see it's working, because you know, our model for this festival is we hire a certain number of bands from the outside, but we also feature a lot of local talent as well. And so those people who are in the traveling bands, the regional and national bands, they come here maybe for the first time ever. They come to Champaign-Urbana, and maybe they have a gig at the Rose Bowl, and they have a gig with 2 other bands, local bands. And so yeah, we hear people going out now, and you know, the word's starting to get out about Champaign-Urbana. We have bands calling us that say, you know, we want to come and play your festival, and we want to play at the Rose Bowl. Okay, so it's kind of getting out there. We have a lot of community partners. Like I said, all the venues we work with pretty much year in and year out. We were using the Landmark Hotel for a couple years, 2 or 3 years. We had events there, and we have a great network of local community help. The Sousa Archives at the U of I, the Krannert Center, of course, Urbana Business Association. There's several other groups, the Storytelling Guild. And, you know, I just want to offer a big thanks to the City of Urbana and the City of Urbana Public Arts program for continued funding. So, and we have a lot of businesses and individuals support the festival. So I just want to just open up this program to the middle page, if you will. All right. And then the program is in there. The page before that, it really starts on page 9. All right, so there's our Friday evening program. And then kind of flip it over to the Saturday program that's in the middle. And I just want to point out that all those events there on Saturday are free. Okay, so that's the other part of the model of the festival, is this, that we do sell a festival wristband that gives you access to everything, Friday night, Saturday night. That's $40, but the program, yeah, the program on Saturday is totally free, and we do that on purpose because we want to make the festival accessible, especially to families. A lot of these are family-friendly. A lot of the programming on Saturday is for kids. We want to see kids, and we want to see families, and we don't want to break the bank for somebody that's got a bunch of kids that maybe they want to bring. Maybe they have a big family. Maybe they want to bring their family and some neighborhood kids. But, you know, we want to get the kids involved. And so, like I said, all that Saturday programming during the day, as long as the sun is shining, we're talking about the first weekend in November. So, you know, when the sun is up and it's still daylight, all those events are free. And so that's a lot of events that we throw on, you know, for free. So I just want to point that out. And then we continue. You know, like I said, we have Friday night, Saturday night programs. And, you know, as far as the economic impact goes, you know, we are an all-volunteer organization. We tread water all year round just to kind of keep up with the festival. But I'm sure if you wanted some information directly, let's say from Steve Campbell at the Rose Bowl or Paul Worth at the Iron Post, or the folks that run Pizza M, they will tell you they have really good weekends, okay, when we have our festival. Those venues are jam-packed. And, you know, I don't know if you know Steve Campbell at the Rose Bowl. Steve doesn't smile a lot, all right? I guarantee you those nights we have the festival there, Steve's smiling. That tells me a lot right there. You get Steve to smile. All right, so the festival works because of a number of reasons. We have an ongoing core group of volunteers who organize and plan the festival, and we have a great network, a large number of about 100 volunteers that we need to make the festival work. As a volunteer organization, our administrative costs are pretty low. We do an annual budget of about $40,000. And yeah, we are plugged into the Sweet Corn Festival. A couple comments have been made about that. This will be the 4th year running. We'll do what's called the Folk and Root Stage at the Sweet Corn Festival. So we partner with Urbana business. We partner with Paris. They put up about half the money. We put up half the money. We run 2 nights at the Sweet Corn Festival on a small stage, and we've had a good time doing that. And it's a good event. So, you know, we have a good variety of events at our festival. Besides performances, we have a lot of hands-on activities. We have dances. We have dance instructions. We have hands-on lessons and workshops. Like I said, programs for kids and storytelling and jam sessions and more. The festival is very family-friendly. And, you know, it's one thing about our festival, it's still a pretty small festival, okay? And so if you want, but you can get really close to all the performers that come. Like if somebody noted is teaching a guitar workshop at our festival, you can hang out with them for a while. You know, that's a big thing for a lot of musicians. They get to hang out with these people who are excellent musicians. Overall, we feel it's a pretty good deal. And, you know, we urge people to come to downtown Urbana. We don't have any, you know, we don't bring in any food trucks or anything. So we try to guide people to all the local restaurants. And, you know, like I said, we never have really done like a thorough economic impact kind of thing. But like I said, I think if you talk to some of the businesses, you know, we try to make sure to advertise Courier Cafe and others, Bunny's, you know, Siam Terrace, everything else is in downtown. So anyway, I think that's about all the comments I have. Like I said, this yellow piece of paper kind of gives you an idea, gives you a little bit of a flavor for the variety of music that we produce. A lot of people ask, like, what's the difference between folk and what's folk music and what's roots music?
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we hit our time limit.
Go ahead.
And I apologize because I think we didn't have our timer on. But if you need to finish up, go ahead.
All right.
Sorry about that.
I think I heard the timer hit, so I'm finished.
I
Let's
didn't
go
hear it
ahead.
hit, so.
No, let's go ahead and wrap it up. That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? Bill Brown.
Just a quick one. Have you, are there any new venues? Have you talked to people at Blackbird or potentially?
We've had an initial
Broadway?
discussion, yeah, with Ian Goldberg, and you know, we're talking. We just had an initial discussion. We're not sure it's going to come together. You know, one thing about us is we're well on our way to having this festival planned out. Okay, and but we're going to include Blackbird if we can. Okay.
Thank you.
Eric.
This is more a question for community development. And I'm really impressed with the array of things that we're seeing and what we're, I think, going to see in the next presentation. Are we doing all that we could do to promote these festivals as destinations for people coming from out of town? Is there more that we could do, or is it just not going to happen more than it is?
Out-of-town promotion is typically the role that we partner with VCC to do that kind of promotion. So I don't know if Folk and Roots has had direct interactions with Visit Champaign County, but I know Pygmalion has. And when I think if someone's driving 50 miles or more to come to an event, and I know some people are doing that for CU Folk and Roots, then that's really the specialty of our Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Okay, so let's be sure, you know, whatever you can feed VCC that might attract people from some distance. I think
I'm pretty sure we keep them in the loop.
You keep them in the loop.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Okay, if we have no further questions, do we have a recommendation for this resolution? Bill?
I move to send resolution number 2017-07048R to City Council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Bill, seconded by Mary Alice. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay, resolution is moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I comment?
Absolutely.
I couldn't get enough of the Howland Brothers at the Rose Bowl. I went back 3 times to see them, so I'd like to see them in the future.
Yeah, they were pretty hot.
Okay, next up, resolution number 2017-07049R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for monthly Urbana First Friday festivals, Imbibe Urbana, fiscal year 2017, 2018, community development. Brandon, do we want to roll in this next ordinance with it?
Well, the council will need to take one action at a time,
Okay.
but the intent is that both actions will need to be taken, so we can discuss both, but it's probably just best to introduce the one for now.
Okay, great. Hello.
This is Kristen Walters.
Hello, Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Walters. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Council, for having me here today. And also thank you to all the other presenters, because it makes my job with Imbibe Urbana really easy, because we try to celebrate what's going on in Urbana, in all parts of Urbana. So I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited for George Saunders to come. So thank you for that. Just really quickly, I sat down with Visit Champaign County, and I'm just saying this to my my friends in arms in terms of creating culture, that they told me that they would rather receive an email every single day about what we're up to than not receive one at all. So you can email them with everything that you want whenever you want, and they will try to get it out there and join it into their narrative. Another thing I wanted to just say is that, you know, I need to find the exact reference for this, but I think it's helpful for everyone to know that the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, does have some statistics about how much people spend typically at these kinds of events. Again, I need to find the exact place that it came from, but what I hear is it's approximately $37 per person at like arts festivals and music festivals and things like that. It may go up for ticketed events. I think that this is for a kind of free community event estimate. I will try to find the exact reference and email you guys. Cool. So I'm here to talk just specifically about Urbana First Fridays, which is Imbibe Urbana's biggest project, I would say. And so it's a year-long series of monthly festivals. And we are just finishing up our first year. So next month is our 12th festival, and we have a lot of fun things planned. Next month we have too much planned. We're going to have an arts festival on Main Street. So we have over 30 local makers who are going to be out there selling their wares. In the past, our Mistletoe Market and our Revelry Market both brought in collectively brought in over $25,000 in revenue for these local makers. So hopefully this is in line with that. And we're going to have Claw, the Champaign Ladies Amateur Wrestling, come as our kind of main event. So they're going to be on a stage right on Main Street wrestling. So I'm going to go through a little bit of history, and I have some photos. You guys have my official proposal, I think, in front of you, or you've seen it. So I just have some photos that we'll walk through. So a vibrant downtown, that's what we're trying to create. With Urbana First Fridays, it's a place-making project. So place-making means that you, instead of a space, right, you have a place. So you take an area, take a space, and you imbue it with more meaning. This is a large space that we are trying to give more meaning to and attract more people to, right? It's really easy to do that with downtown Urbana because it's historically significant, it has great architecture, it's centrally located, and it has wonderful businesses. So, our job is to connect all those dots and create a great narrative and get people out there. So our events typically, you can see on the map, it's a little bit hard to see, but hopefully you can see it at your stations, that the central area is the intersection of Race and Main. Most of our partners are on Main Street, but as you can see, we also partner with the Lincoln Square Mall businesses, the library, Black Dog, and H2O Salon. And, this is from April, so there's been, new businesses added to the list, like Spark Museum and Play Cafe, Blackbird, Collider Co-working Space, and things like that. So what First Fridays is we partner with the local businesses, and we don't dictate to them what they can do. We just support them in being creative about reaching new customers or reaching and celebrating their current regulars and people that they see all the time. So our goals are to create a culturally vibrant and commercially viable downtown. So end goals being, hey, new businesses come, see all these people coming downtown, seeing the businesses do really well, getting a lot of exposure, new businesses move in. Seeing, you know, a large space for the community to come to and engage with local culture is a great, you know, recruitment tool for people moving into this area. We live in a college town. There's a lot of turnover, which, you know, is good and bad for a variety of reasons. But I think that because there's always new people coming to town, it's really important that we have a strong marketing of our city and the culture that and quality of life that we can provide. I guess that was my timer. So yeah, sorry. I'm just going to quickly go through food and drink, art markets, innovation and learning, wellness and transit, hi Mayor, all ages activities, fun for kids, and memorable entertainment. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I remember that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think I just like 30 more seconds. We have some really great new partners coming up this second year, so I'm really excited. It's going to grow a lot. The MTD is partnered with us. We're going to get some great advertising on buses and on the stations, and our goals are to connect more with different communities in Urbana, especially those that are further out from downtown and that might not be as accessible for them to easily get there. But we're going to make it happen.
Thank you. Any questions? Jared, right next to me.
Thanks, Kristen.
You're welcome, Jared.
That was awesome. And thanks for the 15 awesome emails that I got on my way home today from supporters of
all the
Imbibe.
emails I got today.
Sorry, not sorry.
It was really great to see, and it was really great to hear the perspective from the businesses that are being directly impacted in a really real way. I mean, I've been down for quite a number of these events, even participated in a couple of them myself, and as a performer, and so I've got nothing but support for this for you, and thanks a ton for coming to stay this late and tell us about it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And yeah, I am sorry about all those emails, but I thought you would want to hear. I wanted to hear too. So I wanted to see how many people would come back being like, no, that nobody did. So,
Aaron.
I will move approval of 2017-07049R. Move it to council recommendation for approval.
I'll second that then.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Aaron, seconded by Dennis, and then Eric had something to say.
Just a quick question. I wonder about the logistics and the practicality of actually sometime in the future, not this coming year, but sometime in the future, thinking about increasing the frequency.
Oh.
I mean, I just would love it if people automatically said, "Oh, it's Friday night, I'm going to come down to Urbana."
yeah, and I'd love to talk to you about that too. We have a lot of plans and a variety. Like there's, there are a lot of different ideas that we have that some take up not a lot of energy, which would be really easy to implement. And I'm working on those, like some kind of like one day of the month, maybe a Friday, maybe another day that's kind of harder to get people out, but partnering with the businesses to just doing I wouldn't say a coupon booklet, but every first Tuesday of the month or seventh Tuesday, so fourth Tuesday or something like that, having, certain specials at places, and that's one idea. But then also, I have talked to people over in the Cranard area and Tampones area, and they are also interested in having a First Fridays type event over there. I've talked to Cranard, I've talked to the Spurlock Museum, I've talked to the businesses at Gregory Place, and all of those along Gregory, and it's really just how much time I have and my partners have, and the people who work with me. So
Right. I mean, I guess the practical thing is, can you, sometimes things can scale and sometimes they can't. So,
yeah.
But I guess I would encourage you to think in the, during the coming year about the scalability, which obviously would mean somehow cloning yourself, which may be impossible.
No,
but
no, but there are strategies to do it. I have, strategies that are very affordable in my mind, which is creating more of like a platform and a newsletter that, talks about all the events that are happening every weekend. Because we do have a ton of events. I was downtown on Friday this past weekend, and there was a ton of live music going on, and it was really great. And so, and I hope that Imbibe can use its platform to more frequently promote those things happening. Right now, it's not exactly possible, but we'll see how it goes. So I too want to create more frequency of people downtown.
Okay, Mary Alice, go ahead.
Sorry, Dean. Okay, I have two questions. The first one is that we've listed Imbibe as an LLC, and I thought you were a non-for-profit.
Sure. So we are transitioning to not-for-profit. So we haven't. The process takes a lot longer than.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure our paperwork was in order.
Yes. So, but thank you for bringing it up, because we are working with the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois, and we will be under their umbrella. So they're going to act as our fiscal agent. So we will be able to accept donations. Tax-deductible donations until we officially get our 501c3. So the Community Foundation will be in charge of that money, and they will only give it out to us for approved expenses like entertainment and printing costs and things like that. So they will be the stewards of any kind of tax-deductible donations that we get.
Okay. And then my second question is, and I just maybe it's too late in the night, but I can't wrap my head around this $6,000, and I was hoping somebody could just explain it to me in simple terms.
The matching aspect of it?
Yeah.
Brandon can, I'm sure.
Yeah. First Fridays needs to raise $36,000 in private revenues in order to earn the ability to get reimbursed that additional $6,000. So they'll receive the baseline $1,000 per event, and then the additional $6,000, they can only achieve that reimbursement if they can prove they've hit the sponsorship goal, and it's proportional. So if they only raised $30,000, then they would only get $5,000. Thanks for helping me with that. It's getting late. $5,000.
I like to think that every $6,000 we raise, we unlock a new level, and we get another $1,000 from the city. So, and I think that's actually a really great structure. I'm really happy that it's like that, because I think it makes businesses and then also just individuals who will be fundraising with to understand that their impact is not just it goes beyond the one transaction that they might make with us. It's deeper than that.
Yeah, and you use, I was going to say, it's like matching funds, but that's in here. Matching funds.
Yeah. So, and in case you're wondering, our strategy for raising those funds are sponsorship, typical sponsorship, and then we're also going to do some fundraising events through the community, and probably also a crowdfunding campaign. So, and also we are always going to be looking out for grants that are in placemaking or arts grants, or also transit grants as well. All kinds of community development grants, but hopefully we can utilize any kind of grant money. We would spin it around for First Fridays. We would apply it for First Fridays.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, all in favor of sending this to City Council for approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, it is moved for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, ordinance number 2017-07041, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for FY 17-18 downtown event promotion, community development. What's that?
This budget amendment provides the funds in the current fiscal year budget to pay for the agreement you just moved to council.
Okay, any discussion or questions?
I was just going to move to send with recommendation for approval to the council.
Rock and
I'll
roll.
second.
Okay, moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Jared. Any other statements? No? Okay. The clerk call the roll, please. No? Voice vote?
Not yet. Yeah, it can still be.
It's voice vote.
It's voice?
Council.
Okay.
Sorry, I misled you.
He misled me. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, it moves. And ordinance number 2017-07042, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing number of Class R1 liquor licenses for Lumen Incorporated, 300 South Broadway Avenue, Unit Number 142, Urbana, Illinois, 61801. Mayor. And Jared, go ahead.
Pursuant to state liquor law and my own vested interest in this, I have to recuse myself from voting on this. Thanks.
I am so shocked to hear this. So, I'm going to ask Dennis to take the chair for a moment.
Okay, Dean. Oh, he's gone off. Okay, I'm actually going to leave this out. So, Mayor, do you want to make a conversation?
Yes, this is actually a correction in an error made. You voted a few weeks ago to approve a Class R2 liquor license for Lumen, which was for their catering operation in the new Spark Museum and Play Cafe in Lincoln Square. And that would have enabled them to sell beer and wine. What they actually needed and wanted was a Class R1 liquor license, which is beer, wine, and mixed drinks. So we're replacing one liquor license with another. There is an error in the second paragraph. It should read, whereas the City Council finds that the best interests of the city are served by amending said section to increase the number, it should read Class R1 liquor licenses instead of Class R2 listed there. So that's one change. Also indicated on the chart in this ordinance is a reduction in the number of Class A liquor licenses, and that reflects the fact that one license holder chose not to renew. So the A+ VIP Event Center on North Cunningham. So we're reducing one of those.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions at this point? Yes.
Can I make a motion to send this for approval, recommendation for approval to City Council?
Well, I guess you can.
And may I second it?
All right, so we have Mary Alice and seconded by Eric Jacobson. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes and is sent to City Council. I see that Mr. Hazen is back. I relinquish the chairmanship.
Thank you for doing that, Dennis. Next up, resolution, and the final item of the night, I believe, 2017-07045R, resolution adopting City Council and committee rules, legal.
You've all seen the changes that are marked. There was one that was circulated tonight, just to clarify. And then I believe it's Rule 5, various recommendations based on you in prior meetings.
Okay, I'm sorry I got lost there. What are we doing with that?
Well, presumably, I think you have to figure out which language in Rule 5 you would like and whether you want to add the change to Rule number 3B and then presumably move it on to council with or without a recommendation, or keep it in committee.
Okay, does anybody have any recommendations for that? Bill?
I think for myself, either the yellow or blue highlighted in Rule 5 I think would work for me. The idea is just to make it possible. I think I like the blue better. Actually, it says said members may provide a copy of the draft resolution to city clerk, who shall forward it to the appropriate city staff person for review. And then I guess Rule 3B, debate limit, that was mostly just making it clear that in whether it's city council meeting or committee of the whole, everyone would be able to speak 3 times, only twice, 3 minutes each time. And then I think Jim's memo clarified that the mayor and the chair wouldn't be speaking during discussion, but they would yield the chair before they could speak. The only other thing I would want to do is to return to a little bit of discussion on Rule 1 that we changed. We had two options as far as who gets things on the agenda, how you get things on the agenda. I think the city council meetings has always been the mayor or the request of 2 alderpersons. I think I'd prefer to keep it the same as what it has been for the committee of the whole meetings, where it has been apparently 1 or more members of the committee of the whole. And we had changed that to 2 at the last time we discussed it, but I think there were some good arguments made for keeping it to 1 person, even if you don't have a second at the time you propose it, or when you want to bring it, by bringing it to the committee and having discussion, you may be able to get a second on it. Or I guess you can have, well, I don't know, committee of the whole, sometimes you can have discussion before the motion, but I don't know. I think there are some good arguments for keeping that 1 person, I think. And then if we did that, I guess we would also reinstate that last paragraph of Rule 1. That if an agenda item had previously appeared and it was discussed but no action was taken, then you'd need 2 people. So that kind of, I guess, would guard against 1 person continuing to propose the same thing over and over again.
Dennis.
Yeah, I can go with most of what Bill just was commenting about. But one of the things that I question, I guess, about the choice of rule number 5 that's in the blue is that it says here, the alderperson or said member may provide a copy of the same, which is your draft ordinance, to the city clerk, who shall in turn forward it to the appropriate city staff. So basically, the blue text requires that the city clerk shall forward your document to city staff for review, comment, and editing. And I think that's what I was that's what I felt it should be an option that you can ask for, but you don't require. You're not required to have your things reviewed by staff before it's presented. It may be a good idea, but a lot of times we could have something presented in the committee of the whole, which, if the council is interested in it, has the option of sending it to staff for revision or modification to meet the legal requirements. And I think that that's an adequate step to assure that the document, when it finally does come up, again, in the committee or is forwarded to the city council with that provision, allows for the appropriate format to be taking place. So I'm in favor of having more freedom and not requiring things be sent to city staff to be modified or massaged before they're discussed in the committee of the whole. So if I'm understanding that correctly, that's my preference, that if the word shall was taken away, I would go with the blue.
Go ahead, Eric.
So I'm just looking at a quote from Thomas Jefferson, who wrote, "One man with courage is a majority." And in that context, I would like to support Bill's and Dennis's suggestion that 1 person should, in fact, be able to put an agenda on the committee of the whole. And I guess I also would support the freer ability for resolutions and to be placed on the agenda. I think, it may make things a little bit more cumbersome at times, but I think it's important to have that any of us may at any time find ourselves a one-person majority, so we should honor that.
Jared.
Dennis, I just have a question to your point. Does the language in the blue copy not satisfy what you're after? Because I believe the word may, but also the last sentence that is highlighted, each committee of the whole member has the option of placing material in the packet for an agenda item without editing by city staff. I feel like both of those phrases give you leeway to not give it to staff, to not have it reviewed. It's just saying that if you do give it to the clerk for review, that's what he will do with it.
Well, it doesn't say that you're giving it to the clerk for review. It says that you're giving it to the clerk so that you can put it on the agenda. That's how I'm interpreting it.
With the exception of the last sentence, which says that you can place it on there without it going to the city staff.
Mary Alice.
Okay, so I think what everybody's saying is the yellow basically first says if you give it to the city clerk, it'll go on the agenda. And if you want, you can give it to the city clerk and ask them to send it on for, formatting and so forth. So I think, Dennis, I think that's what the yellow addresses. I think the blue does too. It's just a different order. It might be a little more, I don't know if it's as clear. But I think the yellow talks about exactly what everybody's been saying here. So I think the yellow is what we should go with, and I agree with Bill and with Eric in terms of, and Dennis, about having one person put.
I'm going to suggest that we either vote on this, that somebody motions to vote on this, or that we vote to table it until next committee meeting. It's 10:15. Anybody care to make a motion? I'm sorry, go ahead, Dennis, and then,
Was there more discussion?
well, Aaron had his hand up.
No discussion from me.
Okay. Eric had his hand up.
So I'll make a move, I'll move that this be adopted or forwarded to the full council with two provisos. One is that in rule number 1, B3, that this read the request of one or more members of the committee of the whole, and that in Rule 5, the yellow highlighted version be adopted.
Second.
Okay, moved by Eric, seconded by Aaron. All in favor, say aye.
Wait.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that step. Mary Alice, go ahead.
So if we add in the, in Rule 1B3, should we put back the paragraph, the notwithstanding, the one that's stricken out?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Okay, all opposed, same sign. And it passes to council. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Hold on.
Please.
I think you're out of order. You just voted on the amendment to add the notwithstanding language to the end of Rule 1. You have not voted on the rest, and then there's also one further clarification, or two of them, actually. You struck out, or the tenor sounded like you were going to approve going with the, quote, yellow. There is yellow at the bottom of the blue, which is identical to yellow, the larger yellow portion. So that's one issue. So you want to clarify that for the record. And then the final issue is the change to 3B that was circulated to you at the beginning of the meeting.
So I guess I'm reopening the meeting to clarify that, or do we want to move this, or hold it till the next committee meeting? It is up to you all.
Do it now and do it right.
Okay.
I move we accept Jim Simon's astute and honest interpretation of our intent in the motion.
Whatever that means.
Okay. Does anybody care to second that?
Second.
Okay, moved by Eric. I can't even repeat what he said because I can't remember. And seconded by Aaron. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It moves.
Does that set
May we close the meeting now? Okay, meeting is adjourned. Okay.